Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Breaking the Game podcast. I am Stephen Gillespie, and joining me, as he has been almost every time that we've recorded so far since we've been going, and that is Mr. Austin Carr. Austin, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's going good, Steven. It's been a busy day. Caught the end of that last Heat Bucks game, but other than that, I've just been running around all day. Like a chicken with my head cut off. So happy to be doing this now, though. How about you? How you doing today?
I am doing well. We're just here at the Gillespie household. We are getting ready to move to Georgia here at the end of the week. It just feels insane just to think like, oh, okay, yeah, in a couple days I'm going to move from the state of Washington to the state of Georgia, and still have to just kind of human and adult every day on top of that. So it's been pretty weird, but we're making do with the best that we got. But yeah, I caught the end of that game too. We have a game that's going to be going on as we record. That's going to be the Lakers trying to even up the series that they have going on with the Rockets. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Austin, if you don't mind, we can go ahead and get started, man.
Yeah, for sure. I'm ready to get started. You want me to start us off, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. Do it to it.
Okay. Well, first off, we've got some award news. Your guy, Montrezl Harrell, won Sixth Man of the Year, and I think both of our pick, Ja Morant, it was pretty unanimous there, was Rookie of the Year. Like I said, Montrezl Harrell was your guy. I'm not upset that he won Sixth Man of the Year. I think he was definitely deserving of recognition for what he did off the bench for the Clippers, who are arguably, the favorites to win the title. I just thought Dennis Schroeder from Oklahoma City just meant more to his team, I guess, than Harrell. I think if you take Harrell off of the Clippers, they're still going to be the Clippers. Whereas you take Schroeder off of Oklahoma City, they may not have even made the playoffs this year, or they would have been significantly further down the list. Schroeder was just the number one option on that bench unit by far, whereas Harrell kind of split that role with Lou Williams. I do think having both those guys in the six-man contest was a little weird from the same team. Obviously one of them is not the sixth man, but I get why they were probably two of the three most deserving guys. I just think, the Thunder needed Schroeder more than the Clippers needed Harrell. And then Ja Morant, I think very deserving of the Rookie of the Year award, obviously. If I had an award, a vote in this award, I probably would have voted for that one guy that voted for Zion for first place.
Oh, come on.
I know you're against that.
Yes, I very much am.
It is the Rookie of the Year award, so I'll give it to Ja Morant. But if we're talking about the best rookie, Zion to me was still the best rookie. But that's how I feel about that. But not taking anything away from Morant or Kendrick Nunn, who I think actually finished second in the voting. I thought they both had great rookie years. I just, I'm always kind of a contrarian. You know that about me a little bit. So
yeah, I'm starting to gather that.
Kind of like to rile you up a little bit with that Zion take there.
Yeah, you did it. I want to know who actually was that one guy or gal that did vote for Zion, because Ja only took 99 of the 100 votes. So would have been the unanimous Rookie of the Year had it not been for that one person, and could have been you, Austin, as far as I know. But I mean, there's really not a case. I mean, it's of the year. If it was Rookie of 19 games, sure, you could have voted for Zion. But I mean, Rookie of the Year kind of means you have to be there. You got to be available. That's what they say. The best ability is availability.
Right.
I'm not a super big fan of that phrase, but I mean, I use it when it works for, my takes and what I want, so I'll throw that out there real quick.
Exactly. I use it at work all the time.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, there's really no contest. And I think even though you are kind of a contrarian, you still acknowledge that if it was for the year, then obviously Ja was the guy. So
definitely.
You do have some logic to your take there, Austin. Right. But back to Montrezl Harrell. I heard what you said, and you actually kind of took me back. You reined me in a little bit the last time we talked about this, because you said there's two guys on the Clippers bench that could be up for Sixth Man of the Year, whereas the Thunder only have the one guy, and that would have been Dennis Schroeder. I still think that out of the three players that he was the best one. They all roughly scored about the same amount of points. So you just kind of take that argument and kind of bottle that up, right? They all were around that 18, 19 point per game. And then if you look at the rest of what happened, right, Schroeder was basically a shooting guard coming off the bench, kind of a Lou Williams of himself, if you will. And I still think that Montrezl Harrell was a bigger part of the Clippers than Lou Williams, because if you look at the weapons that the Clippers sport on their team, PG-13 and, Kawhi Leonard, both of those guys are perimeter oriented. They really needed that punch in the middle, that kind of energy motor guy in the paint. And that's what Montrezl Harrell brought to this team. So I think that if you look at his role for his team, he was probably more impactful because he did help his team achieve the number 2 seed in the West with his, with his play and his efforts. And yeah, just to circle it back to Ja Morant, we don't really need to spend a lot of time on this discussion because, like I said, it's not that, this was one of those things that was brought up when Malcolm Brogdon got it over Joel Embiid, and you kind of argue like, okay, well, Joel Embiid is far and away a better player than Malcolm Brogdon. In this case, Ja Morant's a superstar too. It's not like that case when Brogdon got it over Joel Embiid, where you had a guy who may be an all-star at his absolute best compared to a guy that could be an MVP at his absolute best. Both of these guys, MVP potential, franchise players, could be an all-NBA first teamer at either one of their positions. So it's not like you had to settle to give it to a guy like Ja Morant, because within a 19-game stretch of this season, he put up Zion Williamson numbers too. If you pick 19 games and put him up against Zion's 19 games, pretty much the same thing.
Right. And, I definitely don't agree or don't disagree with anything you said there. I just, like I said, I more made that statement just to kind of rile you up more than anything, get you going a little bit.
Well, sure.
Ja Morant, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think he's a generational talent at point guard. You don't see a whole lot of, young guards like that come in and take over a team and be the guy, running the show from the get-go that don't get overwhelmed.
Sure.
And he didn't just not get overwhelmed. He flourished, like you said. He had some moments there that just make you sit back and go, wow. I think you said at one time, he has misses that people still watch the videos over and over again and, freak out about.
Yeah.
He has more exciting misses than some guys makes. And his shooting is just going to get better. His effective field goal percentage was only 50%, which is a little bit low, but for a rookie, that's pretty good. Shot 47% from 2, only 33% from 3. He's got a good stroke. So you expect those numbers to go up. Already 7 assists per game. That's right in line where guys like, LeBron James were as a rookie. He rebounds a little bit for his size, 4 rebounds a game for being a pretty small guy too. Definitely deserving of the Rookie of the Year. I don't think, like you said, there's a whole lot more that we can say about that. Harrell, you might be right. He might be more important than Lou Williams to that team. But I just think overall that Schroeder was the best guy off the bench he was the best guy off the bench for what I would say is probably just about the most important bench unit in the NBA. So,
yeah, and also his skill set is kind of more in line with what you would typically see for a 6th man of the year, right? That kind of bucket getter, automatic. I mean, Montrezl Harrell got buckets too, but he's more of like a hustle and energy guy. Whereas Dennis Schroeder, to his credit, has gotten a lot better this year underneath Chris Paul and playing behind SGA, and has improved even defensively. That's an area that he doesn't really get a lot of shine on, but again, part of one of the
you got to kind of give credit too. I'd be interested to see how many guys that play primarily center average 19 points a game off the bench ever. There's probably not that many of them. That's some pretty good numbers for a backup big man. So
yeah, absolutely. And both of these guys get starter minutes too.
Right.
It's just that they don't start. So I mean, you
kind of like Manu Ginobili used to do back in the day.
Pretty much, right? I mean, there's a lot of guys that we could go down that list, but more breaking news, even more breaking than me being right and you being wrong, was both of us being wrong in the Brooklyn Nets. I'll call them the Brooklyn Nets now because they are no longer playing with whatever team that was, the basketball team. The Brooklyn Nets hired Steve Nash. Both of us, my prediction was Tyronn Lue. Who was your prediction?
I actually was about halfway through my article on why I thought Tyronn Lue was the best pick for them too when that news broke. So I didn't have to finish that one. I think I was watching ESPN when I heard about it, and Richard Jefferson, he calls games for the Nets broadcast team, and
Mm-hmm.
he was just as shocked as you and I were. I don't think people within the organization even really knew. I hadn't even heard Steve Nash's name as a somebody that was interested in coaching. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but I don't know that he was on anybody's radar. Um, I'm extremely surprised by it, but I also think it was a home run hire. I think it will be. Um, I was watching quite a bit of coverage about this, and Amin El Hassan on ESPN said, every point guard in the league watches Steve Nash film.
Yeah,
Anytime you want to teach somebody how to run the pick and roll, you watch Steve Nash film. He was kind of helped usher in this new era of fast paced, run and gun, shoot a lot of threes offense. And, his MVPs are kind of widely panned. I don't know that they're, rightfully so. I think he deserved at least one of them. The second one I was a little iffy on when he got it at
sure.
the time and still am now. But he is a two-time MVP. He's going to have the player's ear. He's going to, gain their respect just from that right off the jump. And when a guy like KD says that, he's the best basketball mind that he's ever been around, you've got to kind of got to take that, into account as well. And I think
At
that
least
holds a
for
lot of
that
weight.
day. At least for that day.
Right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I see this being I'll give you a hot take if that's what you want to call it. I think this is going to be one of the best coaching hires of this decade. We'll go as far as to say in the next 10 years. I think he's going to do every bit as good as Steve Kerr, if not better.
Man, he's the model, right? The molding, if you will, that Steve Nash apparently has just been thrust to. I don't know if that has to do both of them being point guards. I don't know
Right.
if both of that has to do with, Nash actually was kind of a consultant or in a player, development
Mm-hmm.
or trainer guy for the Warriors, kind of off and on. It wasn't anything, official or titled super heavily or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And man, so Steve Nash is one of my favorite players of all time. Like
I loved him.
he obviously I can't model my game exactly like Steve Nash, or I wouldn't be here on
Right.
this talk with you, right? But when I do play, I do try to model a little bit of my game after Steve Nash, right? Like I like the behind the look or behind the back passes, the no look passes, the
Mm-hmm.
bounce passes, the kind of looking someone open, being able to shoot a spot up three every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
that's typically how I play my game, right? So, and this is not the first time that Steve Nash had actually been tied to any sort of, coaching or front office position. Teams have been wanting him for a while now. There was an article that I read that posted about 2 years ago, and on the cover of that article, it just so happened to have Steve Nash shaking Kyrie Irving's hand,
Mm.
at like this red carpet
Very
or,
interesting.
black tie, red carpet affair. And I was like, that's weird to actually go back and look at. So not only did he work with Kevin Durant, but, he and Kyrie kind of have this relationship too. And
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, a lot of players, you look at Trae Young and Steph Curry, those are two guys that I look at and I see a lot of Steve Nash in their game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe a little bit of Kyrie Irving as well. These guys that just don't pick up their dribble, guys that make quick decisions, they can shoot and pass very well.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Nash, has left, his fingerprints all over the game even when he retired. Now, when I was thinking about who else I think could coach the Brooklyn Nets, because I was hearing a lot of Tyronn Lue to the Sixers, which hasn't happened
Mm-hmm.
yet, but it's kind of gaining even more and more momentum.
Right.
I was thinking Mike D'Antoni, but who better to have than kind of Mike D'Antoni's little protege, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that 7-second offense. I don't think that we're going to see a lot of Steve Nash, embodiment though in Brooklyn because both of these guys are isolation heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of these guys are really play exactly like Steve Nash. I think that you'll see kind of unselfishness from the rest of the roster that they build around their two star players, right? That's probably where we'll see, the fingerprint of Steve Nash. But with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of Steve Nash in the way that those two play.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That's a good point. But I think a lot of coaching in today's NBA, as much as it is X's and O's, it's every bit as much, if not more, talent management more than
Absolutely.
anything, and it's dealing with egos and dealing with the way guys interact with each other. And I think Steve Nash, from everything you hear about him, everybody that's ever played with him loves him. Everybody that's ever worked with him loves him. It doesn't matter what you and I necessarily think about how good of a job he could do, or if he was deserving of the job or not. It matters what Kyrie thinks, and it matters what Kevin Durant thinks.
Sure.
And it's
Yeah,
obvious
they
he's already
advocated for him.
right. It's obvious he's already got Kevin Durant's, you know, backing for sure. And I don't know as much about his relationship with Kyrie, but I think if anybody can speak Kyrie's language, it's him. A former point guard that's won an MVP, that's won it at the highest level, and somebody that Kyrie will at least respect. And Kyrie does kind of strike me as the type of guy that may have trouble taking a whole lot of coaching from somebody that hasn't coached before, or
Sure.
I mean, played before.
Especially his position, right?
Right. But with a guy like Steve Nash, I think, you avoid all of that. And, worst case scenario is he doesn't do that great. I mean, as a coach, I don't think the floor of this team is all that low regardless.
Sure,
with KD and Kyrie, I think they're obviously they want to win a championship, but I mean, it's not like he's going to come out and lose 50 or 60 games with this roster.
Unless Kevin Durant is like less than half of good as what he used to be, right? And Kyrie Irving just takes up his, tumultuous nature up another level, right? Like,
right.
It would be hard pressed. I want to make one more point before I get to kind of the more polarizing discussion out of his hiring, right? I look at this as kind of a boomer bust hiring myself because this is high stakes. I mean, you could look at Steve Nash and his on the court play was obviously phenomenal. He's a Hall of Famer already. He hasn't been out of the league too terribly long,
right?
And his success on the court speaks for itself. I'm not going to argue that, right? But you've never coached before. You have really no experience in dealing with players as someone who's not a player, right? It's one thing when you're in the locker room and you're running plays and you can kind of, have that camaraderie when you have one guy telling you what to do. And then when he's not around and you're in the room together with just the players, right? Like then you can be like, okay, man, like this is what we need to do. That's completely different. Now you're on the other side of that. Now you're the guy that when you walk away, you kind of hope that the guys that you have left in the locker room are having your back, right? You know what I mean? And this Nets team is pretty cliquey, right? Because Kyrie and KD took less money to bring in DeAndre Jordan. Kenny Atkinson was fired, and then all of a sudden DeAndre Jordan starts getting playing time again, right? Like, back in that starting rotation. So you nailed it on the head that you have to manage these personalities. And this is a really big hire for Steve Nash for your first gig. You know what I mean? Because, like, if he doesn't do well, and when I say do well, like, anything less than 45 wins to me is a failure with this roster and with Steve Nash's mind and coaching, right? So if you do worse than that, and he was signed for 4 years, if you do worse than that, does Steve Nash coach again? I don't think that he does. I mean, because he doesn't really have, like, this is not how he's earning his living already. You know what I mean? Like, this is just kind of like, okay, I want to get back into some resemblance of what I've been used to. But he could easily walk away from coaching and be completely fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. He hasn't ever really struck me as somebody that seemed like he was 100% gonna be a coach when he was done. He seemed like somebody that had other interests outside of basketball. He was, a lot of guys you see become coaches are just basketball lifers. That's all they do.
Exactly.
I could very easily see a couple of drama-filled, tumultuous seasons with these stars, if a couple things go the wrong way here and there, and he just kind of saying, maybe this isn't worth it. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. I could see all of that happening. But at the same time, I could see it going the other way, and I could see it being a great hire. And does he coach again if it doesn't go well? I don't think so, because I don't know that he would want to. it almost just seems like, this was a great opportunity. Hey, these two guys that I already know that are superstars want me to come there. This GM wants me to come there. We got a chance to jump right
Which he
into this.
played with in Phoenix.
Right.
He played with Sean Marks in Phoenix, right? So,
Right. Yep. That is
and
true.
from what I've read, Dirk Nowitzki is coming in to help out a little bit too. So it's kind of becoming more of like a family affair and like a who is the most important thing, type of theme going on. With that being said, obviously, with the way that society has, gone through things in 2020, this hiring has been kind of picked apart. And at first, upon first receipt of the opposition of hiring Steve Nash, and to be clear, everyone that's criticized the hiring has nothing but nice things to say about Steve Nash. It's
Right.
not like anybody's like saying Steve Nash or Sean Marks for the GM of the Brooklyn Nets. No one is trashing these two at all, because anytime that they talk about them, they say, hey, before we criticize this hiring, just let us be clear. These two are great for the community. They're very involved. They're some of the nicest people you ever meet. But even though that we respect them and they're super nice, we have to say this. And what they go on to say is that Steve Nash, although great player, has zero coaching experience and got probably the best job available to coach, predominantly because he is white. He's Canadian, he's white, he's a likable guy, and some pretty high profile NBA analysts or just sports analysts in general have come out and said that this is the latest example of a white privilege. What are your thoughts on that, Austin?
I think first of all, it's sad that it's the world that we live in that we even have to discuss this to the extent that we do. But it is the case. And I just think that's taking it a little too far to saying that he got this job solely because of white privilege. I think one aspect of it is you have to think that just about every GM has like their superstar hire. They're one guy that no matter who else is available, if this guy is available, he's who I want. And by all accounts, that's who Steve Nash is for Sean Marks. And by all accounts too, if Steve Nash didn't want to coach, they were going to keep Jock Vaughn. That's what I've been hearing. He's their lead assistant. I think he's going to be.
Well, they've still kept him.
Right, exactly.
He's going to be the assistant again.
I just think that's, so I think that both of those aspects kind of show you that they did their due diligence. They had other guys lined up that they were looking at, and Steve Nash was somebody that, from all accounts, that they've wanted for a long time. They've been trying to lure into this job. And as far as having no coaching experience, I mean, Jason Kidd went right to a head coaching job right out of playing. Same with Derek Fisher. It's happened to other guys before. For all the guys that have to start in the video room or start by being a film coordinator and working their way up like Eric Spoelstra and like Sam Cassell has done, and a lot of people were saying that Sam Cassell is somebody that may have been overlooked for this job. For all the guys that have to go that way, there's going to be a two-time MVP that's just going to jump the line because, he kind of carried this league for a while on his shoulders. He helped make it what it is today. Steve Nash especially kind of helped make the point guard position what it is today. And I think that had more to do with it than anything. But, it is a sensitive topic, and it's definitely good to have a discussion about it. And I get both sides of it. But I like this hire. I think that like I said, they seem like an organization that did their due diligence. And it could be like you said, Sean Marks just wanted to hire some of his old friends, and which it would be unfortunate if that's really the way it went. But I don't really have much of a problem with it.
Yeah, so when I first heard this, I was thinking that basically along the same lines as you, like, well, Derek Fisher, he was the first name that popped into my head, and that's just because he played underneath Phil Jackson, who was president of basketball operations, right? So
Right.
That was almost sort of like nepotism in a way to me when I first saw that. But the counter argument that I heard, and like, here's the thing that I would encourage anyone to do when you hear something that you don't agree with: listen anyway, and then go and actually try to look. And I'm not saying you, Austin, I'm just saying for anybody watching
Right.
or listening now or later, right? Go listen anyway, even though you don't agree with it, and then go prove yourself right. You know what I mean? Like, go and do some research. Now, one of the the one point that I heard that I do agree with that's being brought up in this is that it was probably the best job available for coaching, right? And so you have the guy with the least amount of coaching experience who hasn't put in that effort, like kind of like how you mentioned earlier, Sam Cassell, who I put down in my article that I wrote not too long ago, that if Denver cut ties with Mike Malone, which they very well might, I think Sam Cassell would be an excellent head coach for that team, right? But you have the guy in Steve Nash with the least amount of playing time, or excuse me, coaching experience, getting the most sought after job when you had a guy like Tyronn Lue, who's been to NBA Finals, who's a former point guard as well. So everything that we can say about Steve Nash, his ability to kind of run an offense and things like that, Tyronn Lue has that same thing, but he's also got coaching experience, and not only that, but championship coaching experience, and he's getting passed up by a guy who just so happened to play with the general manager. So these are things that I'm like, okay, I kind of see it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean that I think that Steve Nash can't get the job, or that he shouldn't have got the job, or that I think he's going to do a bad job. It's just that I can see the point being made that, okay, the guy with the least amount of experience got the best job available, and he played with the general manager. You know what I mean? So it kind of strikes true to that case. And what I would like to see, what could alleviate all of this, is if we saw like a list of people that were interviewed for the job. I think that would help, because you have to hold yourself accountable as an executive, and if you can't say like, well, yeah, I mean, Steve Nash was the best guy available because we interviewed X and X and X. You know what I mean?
Right. And they may very well have done that, and we just don't know. And that's why I don't want to judge any of the hiring too harshly by any means. But a couple things, I think obviously the Nets' job of all the coaching openings, you have the best chance to come in and compete right away. But is it the best coaching job? I mean, Kyrie and KD aren't exactly like the easiest guys to deal with. We've seen both of them. I mean, KD's never let his issues off the court stuff ever really affect his play, but he is coming back from a serious injury, and we already know what Kyrie can do to a team's chemistry. We've seen it happen before. And who knows, maybe Ty Lue was brought up and Kyrie Irving said, no way, I don't want to play for him again. Maybe he didn't like his time under him. So there's just a lot of unknowns, and Steve Nash may be uniquely kind of built, kind of just built differently than a lot of guys. He might be uniquely talented in being able to, wrangle in these big egos of Katie and Kyrie. And maybe that's what they saw, and maybe that's why they wanted him so bad. So I just try to withhold judgment on those kind of things, because I definitely don't know, like you said, who they did hire, or who they did interview, or who they wanted, or who they had on their list. Because, if he was the first guy they interviewed and they said, all right, we want you, that's it. And then, I don't think they did their due diligence. I don't think they did as much research or as much work as they would need to. And that's where, like you said, holding yourself accountable comes into it. Because I heard somebody say something a long time ago, like, just based off of race, for years, a lot of teams were probably passing over 25 to 30% of some of the better candidates in the coaching pool or in the GM pool. And that's just counterintuitive in the first place. I'm saying, like, teams that maybe don't worry about diversity in their hiring process.
Like, why would you not want to cast a wider net to get the best available guy?
Thank you. Yeah. So, no, and I think that the Nets, at least Sean Marks and their front office strike me as a group of guys that definitely do the work. They found Kenny Atkinson. They've gotten a lot of kind of gems out of the second round of the draft, and they've developed personnel really well. So by all accounts, it seems like they have a pretty good culture there. So, like I said, I just try not to judge anything too harshly if I can.
Yeah, sure. And just one more point I want to make is that you mentioned that, like, Nash's ability to manage egos and stuff like that, he might be well built. Well, that's another point to this too, right, Austin, is that there never seems to be like a set criteria. Like, What do you have to do? What do you have to be good at in order to be a good NBA head coach? And when we see someone like Steve Nash, who again, phenomenal player, one of my favorites ever to watch, what made him so well qualified that these guys like Sam Cassell, like all these other well qualified, Tyronn Lue, Larry Fizdale's still out there. You know what I mean? Like you have all these guys who are still wanting to get NBA jobs. Like what else do they have to do? What do they got to do to get an NBA to not just get an NBA job? And that's another point is that a high likelihood of success NBA job, not coming in as like a player development guy on a bad team.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because you're likely going to be at least top 4 in the East on this team if you come in and coach. And like, I'm fairly certain, Austin, that you and I could come onto that team. And if they just ran our X's and O's, we could probably be top half in the East, right?
Oh, I'm sure. You just hand the clipboard over and say, "Hey, run a pick and roll every now and then. You guys will be all right."
Yeah, right. So that's kind of that's kind of the point that I'm hearing, and I'm seeing like, okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense because almost but like you could have had any coach come in and do well, right? Like it didn't have to just be Steve Nash, who isn't very well qualified, but will probably do a great job. You know what I mean? Like Mark Jackson kind of had, keys taken away from him. He did a great job, and the front office didn't like him. Well, you know who they liked? Steve Kerr. Everybody likes Steve Kerr, right? So Steve Kerr comes in and inherits a Hall of Fame roster, and now he's one of the best basketball minds in the NBA. He was just kind of well suited for that job. You know what I mean? Like not saying that he wasn't, but these are kind of the moving goalposts, if you will, of like, okay, well Mark Jackson did a great job, but Steve Kerr, he took him up another level. Like Mark Jackson, they were top 5 in offense and defense while he was coaching there his last season. So, I mean,
I think the Mark Jackson thing, from what I've heard, is just the fact
and
that
he didn't have Kevin Durant.
True, they didn't have Kevin Durant yet, but I think the Mark Jackson thing was more. I remember hearing the GM say in an interview, you can't be the head coach in an organization and have 200 people not like you. And according to all the accounts from them, that everybody but the players, Mark Jackson kind of rubbed the wrong way. So I don't know that even really had anything to do with his coaching ability. And I think it's unfortunate for him because I would like to see him get another chance somewhere in the NBA.
But how huggable are guys like Bill Belichick? You know what I mean? Do you think that he's the most open or most friendly personality in there? Like,
no, but
this is what I'm saying.
Once you start winning that much,
once you start, Mark Jackson didn't really get a chance to start, and that's what got handed over to Steve Kerr. And that's the only thing that I wanted to point out is that these guys come in and develop like a Mark Jackson, and then they build you. And you could see the same thing in the NFL with Tony Dungy, right? He built the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up and then had to turn the keys over to Chucky, and then he won a Super Bowl with that team. Same thing with Steve Kerr in the NBA. Like these head coaches, minority coaches come in as development guys. Oh, all of a sudden the team is developing. Oh, all of a sudden we have these Hall of Fame talents. Oh, all of a sudden we can win a championship. We don't like your personality. We'll kick you off. Hey, Steve Kerr, you're kind of easy on the eyes. You're a likable guy. You smile a lot, and you kind of have a little bit of prickly in your comments, which is what we like. So you come on over and earn a NBA championship over here on this team.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from with all of that, and it does. You make a lot of good points. And as far as the moving goalposts in the NBA, I think every job is so different. I think it takes a completely different skill set to build up a team like, say, the Bulls or the Hornets than it does to manage a roster like the Nets have, or like coming in as the Lakers coach.
I would agree with you on that. And absolutely.
But almost though, you would think you would want someone with a lot of coaching experience to deal with a roster like the Nets have. Mm-hmm. But it remains to be seen. Like I said, you think it's boom or bust. I think it's going to be boom all the way. I think it's going to be a great hire. I'm excited to see how it goes.
They'll probably be a 50-win team year after year. They'll probably be in the Eastern Conference Finals. They'll probably be fine. And
I think the real yardstick of how good this team does, or if it was a good hire, is more. You'll see it more off the court almost than on the court.
I think it'll be Kyrie Irving. How
Yeah,
like
if
if
everything's
Kyrie Irving,
harmonious and everybody's getting along and there's not a lot of side noise, this team is primed to compete for the next 4 or 5 years, probably for the title. So,
wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, and we spent a good deal of time on that, and we could move on to the playoff topic. But I
yeah,
just want to say, Austin, I appreciate you, being open and honest and being receptive
you
too.
too,
And
man,
yeah,
for sure.
right on. Well, let's talk some basketball. And this is a series, speaking of Toronto and Boston, that I was so ready to come on today and talk about how good our Celtics were. We both picked
Right,
them. We were so close, so close. And that we can talk about this right now because this happened in Game 3. We were point 0.5 seconds away from being up 3-0 and being a part of that 139-0 club, talking about teams that have held a 3-0 lead
right.
in the playoffs. All 139 teams have gone on to win that series. No one has ever come back from 3-0. And a crazy shot. Well, let's walk through this play, Austin.
Right.
Taco Fall, who is how tall? 7'6",
I
seven foot
think, yeah,
five.
something like that.
I mean, an inch or two, depending on
One of the tallest to ever play.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's measuring him that day, he ranges anywhere from 6'5" to 6'6", somewhere in there.
Right.
With a standing reach of about probably 10 feet, if not just a couple inches shy. Standing over Kyle Lowry, who is our size. He's 6 foot. Well, I'll say my size. How tall are you, Austin?
About 6'3". So.
About 6'3". Okay, so you're a little bit taller than him.
But
Passing
yeah,
over to Taco Fall,
big difference.
all the way over on the opposite baseline, in the corner, in the shooting position for OG Anunoby to be able to lift up and hit the game-winning three-pointer to give the Rockets one victory to make the series 2-1. That was just an insane shot.
The whole
Probably
entire
doesn't happen
play
again in 100 plays.
Right. The whole entire play was just wild. Just to be able to make that perfect of a throw right to the corner like that to him, where he pretty much just had to catch it and throw it up. 0.4 is the least amount of time that can still be on the clock that you can actually take a set shot. Otherwise, it has to be a tip in. And, I've heard a lot of people say, why do you go to a gimmick defense like that and put Taco Fall on the on the inbounder? I don't think that made a bit of difference one way or the other. So what? They're going to put somebody to defend that inbound pass regardless. Why not put the biggest, tallest guy out there and try to at least disrupt his view? And then I've also heard people say, why go to a kind of a zone sagging defense in that situation, which, you can second guess everything, but that's from what Brad Stevens said. That's their out of bounds play defense on the sideline there. That's what they do. And I mean,
they've been pretty successful at it all year long.
Exactly. He would have gotten killed if he had gone away from his every other game, strategy. They would have said, well, every other time you've had this situation, you've played like this. Why didn't you do it this time? You changed it for the playoffs. You didn't stick to your guns. You hear that kind of stuff all the time.
Danged if you do, right?
Right. And, it was just an incredible shot by a guy who's making a name for himself in these playoffs as, kind of right place, right time, makes the right play a lot. He hits a lot of big shots. Anunoby's been, pretty solid for
great
the Raptors.
Defender and rebounder. Absolutely.
Whole series. And, I think that was understated a little bit how much they missed him last year, even though they did win the title. And, he was a big addition to this team, not being injured this year. And, like you said, it is crazy how much difference it is when you're up 2-0 versus 3-0 or 2-1 even, because it's a completely different series. It goes from no chance at all to, now it looks like Toronto has just as good a chance as Boston to win this series because obviously, game 4, Toronto won again, 100-93 on that one.
Yeah, it's insane. Anunoby literally saved their chances at a title this year. Not only just advancing past this round, but going and facing off against whatever team the Western Conference kind of sifts out of there, right?
Right.
Gordon Hayward has still been out for the Boston Celtics. In Game 3, Kyle Lowry had 31, 8, and 3, shot 56% from the floor, 25% from deep, 75% from the line. Van Vliet had 25, 6, and 3, shot 40% from the floor, 38% from deep, 100% from the line. Siakam and Anunoby were both in double figures. They had 16 and 12. And then if you look at the if you look at the Celtics, obviously they were in position to win this game if it came down to 0.5 seconds left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Kemba had 29 3 and 3, shot 60% from the floor. Over half of his threes went in, made all of his free throws. But really, where it came down to why the Celtics lost this game, it was beyond that 0.5 seconds, right? Because Jaylen Brown only had 19, 12, and 2. He didn't hit any of his threes. He misses, half of his free throws. And Jason Tatum only had 15, 9, and 6, shot 27% from the floor, 25% from deep, and 66% from his field goals, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and Boston was actually almost a 0.5% better from the floor than the Toronto Raptors. It really came down to that last second shot because Boston, you look at their stat line, they were +5 on the boards, +2 in points in the paint, and they had 4 less fouls, but Toronto had 1 less turnover and 2 more assists. So you look at that kind of gives you the story, those winning stats, the fewer turnovers and more assists. If you hold on to the ball, you might have a chance to win the game in moments like these. And I don't know if anybody was expecting Anunoby to be able to make that play. You know what I mean? Or for Kyle Lowry to even consider throwing the ball all the way over there. How often does something like that happen?
Right. That's one thing I wanted to mention too. If there's one spot on the court in that instance that you probably think is about the last spot that a guy's going to be able to get a pass to, it's going to be the far corner like that with almost no time left. It was everything short of a miracle, as close to a miracle as you can get on a last second shot. And, it completely overshadows the play that Kemba Walker made at the other end, finding Daniel Tice. I mean, how often do you see a bounce pass into the post with half a second left for a wide open dunk? And
Michael Jordan to Cartwright in the Michael
right.
Jordan in the playoffs. Like, that's what that play. I instantly thought that pass against the New York Knicks that MJ did, that you were able to see in The Last Dance. I instantly thought, holy cow, that was like the Michael Jordan pass. And
right. And
it was
it's just
phenomenal.
It was just a crazy ending to a back and forth game. And, even just looking at the notes of it, like you said, Toronto made 4 more threes, but Boston was 20% better from the free throw line, had 7 more made free throws. Boston was better on the boards. They were better in the paint. Toronto had a few more assists and were 1 fewer turnover, so it was very evenly matched game. And as far as the Celtics, it seems like they can't get all 3 of their big 3, if you want to call it that, of Brown, Tatum, and Walker to all kind of have a good game at the same time. They kind of just are out of sync. It seems like one of them plays great and the other 2 are just okay, or 2 have a pretty good game, or Marcus Smart didn't really do as much as he has done for Boston in these last 2 games, and it just seems like they can't put it all together. And even in game 4, Toronto was a little more convincing in the game 4 win.
Absolutely.
They had Siakam had 23 and 11. Lowry had 22 and 11 and shot 40% from 3 in that game. He made 8 for 8 from the free throw line.
Yep, 7
assists.
That game.
Yep, they had 5 guys in double figures in that game. And so they spread the ball around a little bit more. The Raptors did. They shot the ball a little bit better in game 4, and it seems like the Celtics can't find a rhythm on offense. The last 2 games they've played really poorly, but you almost have to be confident if you're a Boston fan, because they didn't play well in game 4. I would say in game 3 they were all right, but their offense,
even in game 2 they weren't like on fire when they won that game either. So like, if Boston starts clicking, and that may be a big if. I kind of noticed the same thing. Their big 3, which I consider to be, Tatum, Brown, and Kemba. I noticed that same thing. But if you look at the way that the teams have performed over the last 2 games, which have resulted in Raptor victories, it's basically been boiled down to this point here. The Celtics have had more rebounds and points in the paint with fewer fouls, but Toronto has had more assists and fewer turnovers. So it's like, even though that Boston is keeping themselves in the game by, getting rebounds, by getting tough shots in the paint and converting and committing less fouls, Toronto's still whipping the ball around and they're holding on to it. And that's what you do in order to win, right? Like that's one aspect of these winning stats is what I like to call them. And it's just hard, right? Because we both want Boston to win, but taking off our biased glasses, you know what I mean? Like it almost feels like they're just not wanting to secure this because to close out the half of game 4, they gave up a last-second shot to Fred VanVleet for the game to be tied going into half. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like they cannot close out a game. They will put themselves in position to win it, but in these clutch moments against the reigning NBA champions, they just can't close them out for whatever reason over the past 2 games. Is this something that you can see continuing to happen moving forward in game 5?
Well, that's a good point and a good question, and I think that has a lot to do with it. You made mention to the Last Dance, and I'm sure you watched that as religiously as I did. But it almost feels like Boston is the Bulls before they beat the Celtics, in that
right.
They haven't gotten there yet. Toronto did last year. Toronto figured out how to win these close games, how to close out playoff games, and Boston's stars are still relatively young. Kemba Walker's been around for a while, but the other 2 are pretty young players. Smart's been around, the block a few times, and this team has gone to the Eastern Conference Finals recently, but they've never really gotten over that hump. They've never gotten to the finals. They haven't won, a big Game 7 in the playoffs yet, and it just seems like they've kind of got to take their lumps. And this is maybe their hurdle that is going to kind of propel them to a championship if they can get past, the defending champs, the way Jordan and the Bulls had to do, and the way the Celtics or the Pistons had to do over the Celtics back in the 80s. And,
so you're saying that we're going to see Jason Tatum hit the weight room and do a Rocky montage? And
maybe so, and running up the side of a mountain and lifting a horse-drawn carriage full of people over his head, all that stuff. I can see it all coming.
This would from Rocky to Hercules almost.
Yeah, well, that's Rocky 4 or 5. I think it's 4, the one where he fights the Russian. Yeah. But anyway, it kind of Game 3 kind of felt like that turning point where, the Raptors are a team, like I said, that have won the big games before. They've been in these situations and they've seen what it takes to win, and they
have the NBA Coach of the Year,
right? And they've made adjustments. They've made the plays that they've needed to make. They haven't had, these stretches at the end of the game where they go cold or anything like that. And, they've gotten through their shooting woes of Lowry and VanVleet, and they seem to have picked it back up the last couple of games. And, I think kind of the same thing we saw in Oklahoma City and Houston series. I think Boston, if they play their best, looks like the better team. But Toronto just is making the big plays. They're maybe a little bit better coached, and they're just seem to be kind of more prepared in the big moments.
How dare you talk bad about Brad Stevens on this podcast that you share with me? How dare you? No, I mean 100% right though, because I think that they're still. I mean, Boston is still really young. I mean, like you mentioned, outside of Kemba and Hayward's not even playing. Smart's still 26? Like he's not, an old vet by any means, but and Robert Williams is starting to get playing time too, and he's a young cat with very, very little experience in playoff games, let alone NBA games in general. So he's cutting his teeth at a pretty crazy time against the reigning NBA champions. So you may be right. This may be a series that they may be all the better just to go through this as a team, just to grow and get stronger. But in today's microwave society, that's not an acceptable answer. Just to say, well, it's good for them to lose. You know what I mean? It's right. Not, you can't come out and say this is good for us. You know what I mean? Us losing is good for us.
That's kind of where player empowerment and players moving around the league as much as they have and demanding trades and using their leverage, which I'm all for. I'm not against that. I'm not saying I'm against it in any means, but I think that's kind of where it's robbed us of that kind of progression of how guys, become the man, because, Jordan was great, but Jordan wasn't Jordan until he started winning in the finals. And kind of part of his legacy that makes him the GOAT for so many people is that he never went to another team. He didn't join, the Golden State Warriors after they beat him in the Western Conference Finals. He didn't go and join his best friend in Miami because another team was too good. Like you said, he hit the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in other players too. They built their team around him just
Yeah,
like
that
everybody
helped
else
too.
does.
Tony Kukoc and
But
Strodman,
they
Sticker,
brought in
yeah,
a
Ron
bunch of
Harper.
really good players and they did all that. But it's just the idea that, instead of going and joining another team to get better, let's do it here. Let's go through, whoever's right in front of us to get to the next round and take our lumps. And, like I said, I just think some of that whole process is gone now because, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it is a microwave society and everybody wants to win right now.
Well, yeah, and let's not forget that this is basically a brand new look for the Boston Celtics because, they lost Al Horford and Kyrie Irving, and then
Mm-hmm.
they inserted, Daniel Tice into the starting rotation and then Kemba Walker. So, and you're giving more opportunity to Tatum and Brown now. So, I mean,
Right.
this a lot happened in this 1 year that feels like 3 years kind of shoved in
Mm-hmm.
one.
It seems like forever ago that LeBron was playing against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It seems like about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But we can move on to the next series. Do you want to bring us into the
Yeah,
Clippers
the
and
next series we have to talk about is the Clippers and the Nuggets. Game one, Clippers came out on fire, won that game 120-97. Game two was kind of the other way around. The Nuggets came back and flipped the script on them and took the 110-101 victory. Kind of the big story in game one, Patrick Beverly returned for the Clippers,
mm-hmm.
and he only played 12 minutes, but he had a huge impact. He was
Sure
kind of
did.
the big talking point after the game because the game wasn't really too close. Doc Rivers had a lot of good things to say, about him being back. And this is, I think, if I'm right, the first time all playoffs that they haven't had a single player on their injury report for the Clippers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they're healthy
because they were
for
missing
the
Harrell for a long time.
yeah, they're healthy for the first time really since the season restarted, and I don't think they've had their whole roster a whole lot this season really. Period.
Nope.
They've played 33 different starting lineups, which is by far the most in the league. And the Nuggets looked like a team that just came off of a tough seven-game series. They were tired. They looked like they had heavy legs. Um, they looked like they needed some rest and they didn't get it. I don't know if you saw the interview after game 7 that Jamal Murray did, but he was like genuinely shocked when they told him he only had 1 day rest in between, game 7 and game 1.
Yeah.
And he looked at the guy, he's like, excuse me? He's like, we play on Thursday or, whenever it was. But
Yeah.
that was funny to see. But it looked every bit the part like a team that was rested and healthy versus a team that wasn't.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and going back to this first game, Kawhi Leonard was kind of doing more Kawhi Leonard things. He had 29, 3, and 2, shot 75% from the floor, hit half of his threes and all of his free throws. PG-13 has been kind of in and out still. I mean, this whole playoff P gimmick is not a good look for him.
Right.
Even in game one when they won big time, he had 19 points, 7 rebounds and 4 assists, sure. But he only shot 46% from the field, only 28% from deep, which is 2 of 7, according to my calculations, and 71% of his free throws, right? So not super sexy efficiency out of him. 3 other Clippers were in double figures, talking about Marcus Morris, Montrezl Harrell, and Lou Williams. And in game one, not a single Denver Nugget scored over 20 points. Actually, Nikola Jokic led the entire team with scoring with 15 points. He also had 3 boards and assists, kind of blowing the barn doors off there. He shot 42% from the floor, hit 0 threes, and only hit 3/4 of his free throws. And then Murray coming off of that outstanding 7-game stretch where he was just exchanging 50-point games with, Donovan Mitchell. In game 1, he only had 12 points, shot 33% from the floor, 25% from deep, and didn't even get to the free throw line once. And, the other Nuggets that were in double figures that game were Paul Millsap with 13, Grant and Morris both had 12. The Clippers made 1 more 3 on 12 less shot attempts. They made 13 more shots on only 1 more attempt. So you talk about efficiency at its finest. The Los Angeles Clippers came ready to go on that one. And boy, did that set the tone, and it seemed like this was going to be a sweep. If you were to guess one way or the other off of that game 1 performance, you would think the Denver Nuggets do not stand a chance.
That is exactly the feeling I got after game one, Stephen. I even said right in my notes, game one felt like it was going to be, a clean sweep. It seemed like one team couldn't get an easy basket to save their lives, and the other team got open shot after open shot all night long. The Clippers obviously shot almost 70% as a team in that game, which is insane. I saw a thing about Kawhi Leonard after game one. He was like 24 of 30 on shots from 10 to 14 feet in these playoffs, which is 80%, which is insane.
Nice.
So they said he was single-handedly bringing back the mid-range game.
That's his game, though, man.
It is. It always kind of has been.
Yeah.
And then game two was just kind of the exact opposite. I didn't see it coming. PG, the playoff P, another funny thing I heard people calling him pandemic P. I thought that was kind of funny.
There's a whole bunch of names that I just don't feel like I can mention here on the air about how poor playoff P has performed. All alliteration aside, he is.
It is kind of catchy though. If he was a great playoff performer, it would be the best nickname in basketball.
It would be such a cool nickname.
Right, playoff P, but it doesn't work when you shoot.
I heard him COVID 13. People are calling him COVID 13.
Right. That's awful.
It's terrible. But
it is funny,
in
though.
game two, you had Murray kind of bounce back, if you will. He had 27, 6, and 3, shot 47% from the floor, 37% from deep, and 80% of his free throws. And Nikola Jokic, man, this dude, like, he heat checked in the first one. He was just like, I'm just gonna see if I can hit this three real quick, and he did. He was 80% with his threes shot. I think he hit all 4 of his makes in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so too.
But he was 58% from the floor, hit all of his free throws. They even got some good minutes out of, Gary Harris was hitting almost everything that he threw up as well. Morris played all right. Michael Porter Jr. even put up double figures in this game. Mm-hmm. That's how well that they were doing, right? And in game two, it was kind of, we'll talk about another star that did this in the fourth quarter too. His 0 points in the fourth quarter. He had decent numbers, 22, 8, and 3. There are some players that wish they could have a bad night, a Kawhi Leonard bad night, right? But he only shot 36% from the floor, 40% from 3, which isn't bad, and 80% from the free throw line, which isn't bad. But boy, howdy, could he not score at all. And, excuse me, I was just reading Paul George had 22, 8, and 3.
It's all good.
Kawhi Leonard did have, in fact, a terrible night. He did get a double-double, 13, 10, and 8. He
almost
shot 20.
Triple-double.
Yeah, 20. Not a good one either.
No.
23% from the floor, 0 of 3 from deep, and 71% from the line. All of those numbers are obviously not what we're used to seeing out of Kawhi, especially in these playoffs. We mentioned on our last show that he's just kind of quietly been the best player in the playoffs, and didn't really do well.
Yeah, well, he kind of fell off a cliff in game two, but I think that's kind of to be expected in this back-to-back. They're playing every other day. Mm-hmm. We kind of discredit that all the time and say, oh, they're professional athletes. They should be able to play, just about every day. Aren't they?
Yeah,
they
don't got to travel. They don't got to go to the airport. They don't
right, but it's still, if you think about it, they're still big, massively strong, huge guys banging into each other, going full speed. They are playing as hard as they absolutely can. Most of them are, at least you would expect. So it's not like a local pickup game at the Y. These guys are battling for 48 minutes, and so it does take a toll on them, and you could see that looking at the Nuggets in game one, and I think you kind of saw it a little bit from the Clippers in game two, and it kind of underlines something that may not be too much of a worry for the Clippers because he is so good. But if Kawhi has an off night, they can't really rely on Paul George to pick up the slack, it seems like, at least so far. And they kind of need Kawhi to be Kawhi almost every game, or he kind of sets the tone for this team. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because Lou Williams is somebody that hasn't been talked about a whole lot.
Oh, please, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Lou Williams is, Paul George's number one fan because he has been just as bad, if not worse, overall as a player than Paul George for this Clippers team. And this is what this kind of goes back to the 6 Man of the Year conversation. Montrezl Harrell is way better for this team, not overall as a player in a career, than Lou Williams, right? Like
Right.
Lou Williams in game one, he did shoot 5 of 9 from that game, but he did not make any threes at all in that one. And game two was even worse. He shot 37% from the floor and was 0 of 6 from deep. At one point, like I was messaging a buddy of mine on Facebook, and I was like, Lou Williams can stop shooting right now because they were in position to still make it a competitive game. You know, they actually got it down to closer than the 9 points that they lost by. And I was just like, Lou Williams, you can absolutely stop shooting 3-pointers now.
And
He's
that's
MIA, dude.
it's kind of a good point that you make about Lou Williams' game is if he's not hitting shots, what else does he do real well? He's not a superstar defender. He's not really a playmaker. He's not a rebounder. He's in there to score points for this team. And if he's off, that's a big blow to their their whole roster as far as their offense. Because you look at the rest of their starters, Zubats isn't an offensive threat per se, not a big one. The Marcus Morris is good, but he's not going to be a 20, 25 point a game scorer. And so, they kind of need Harrell and Williams and Paul George all to have, around 20 points.
Somewhat efficient nights would be great. And
exactly.
I would love to see Landry Shamet get some more burn in place of Lou Williams, at least in this series, because he can hit threes. He's a decent defender.
Bit more of a traditional point guard.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more of a traditional point guard. I do think they, as many different bodies as you can kind of throw at Jamal Murray to slow him down too wouldn't hurt. Yeah. I think you saw in game two, the Nuggets used their depth a little bit better than the Celtics did, the Clippers did. Obviously, both teams are fairly deep. I think two of the deepest teams if you just look at their whole roster. Now that Gary Harris is back for the Nuggets, I think that was.
They couldn't miss though in game two, man. Like they made 6 more threes than the Clippers on 8 more attempts. So you're talking about just
they made 5 more shots overall on only 3 more attempts. So they,
the Clippers. And here's what's crazy: the Clippers were actually +7 in rebounding, +2 in assists, +12 in points of the paint, and +6 in fouls. The only thing that Denver had an advantage over the Clippers is that they were +5 in turnovers. So this is going back to holding on to the ball. You know what I mean? So,
and Denver at one point was up by like almost 20. It was.
I think it was like 25.
It wasn't even really as nearly as close as the final score said, and so it was just kind of an odd turn of events considering. I really of all the series that we have left, it was the one that I was probably the least excited about. Just after game one, especially.
Felt like it was going to be a
sweep. I kind of felt that way in the first round about the Nuggets and the Jazz. Not so much that it was going to be not a competitive series. Just I thought the Nuggets would handle them a little bit easier than they did, and it turned into a 7-game war. And in this series, I kind of thought the Clippers are going to handle them pretty easy. And this is looking like it's going to go fairly back and forth. And just looking at the way game two went, that first quarter, the Nuggets came out 44 points in the first quarter.
How often do you think that's going to happen? Like if we're being 100 right now, as the kids like to say, right? If we're being 100, how often do you think that the Nuggets open with a 20-something point lead against Doc Rivers in this Clippers?
You've got to think that that's an outlier. That's not going to continue to happen. Now, I could see them having a 40-point first quarter again, but they're probably going to give up 36. Not 25.
Lou Williams, for whatever reason, like he needs to turn it on. He's the X factor to me. A lot of people are looking at Paul George. Paul George is still giving you great defense and great rebounding, and still can move the ball around. Right. Like you mentioned earlier, if Lou Williams is not hitting, he's not doing anything else. He's just a microwave. That's all. That's what you get paid to do. And if he's not doing that, he's just a liability on the other end. And then you got to keep digging out of a hole, basically.
Right, and it's just kind of interesting looking through the box score and just seeing how you look at the series we just talked about, the Celtics and the Raptors. And they're playing 7 or 8 guys, and one of those guys is getting 5 minutes a game. I'm looking here at the Clippers played like 12 guys, and the Nuggets, I think, played 13 in that game.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened in game one. And so it's just a nice dichotomy to see. And one kind of interesting tidbit I wanted to throw out there. Mason Plumlee for the Nuggets got some run in game two a little bit. That was fun to see.
Did.
I actually played against him quite a bit when we were growing up, so that was interesting to see.
How many times did you get dunked on?
Oh, not that many, because I knew how to get out of the way. I wasn't going to try to beat on somebody's poster.
Yeah, there you
but
go.
I can honestly say with a straight face that probably 7 out of the 10 times we played them, we beat their team pretty badly. Like it was him and his brother and a bunch of kids that could not play at all. And he'd have 35, the other Plumlee would have 30, and the rest of the team would score. Yeah, Miles, and the other rest of the team would score 6 points. So they kind of did everything. Sure. And this was 7th,
like the Lopez brothers in Stanford, right?
But no, they were terrific players. They were always fun to play against. It was mostly fun because there was always coaches there to watch, and I mean they weren't there watching us, but it was still fun to play ahead.
People there regardless. It's okay if you got to benefit by playing against NBA players, right? So nothing wrong with that. But yeah, do you have anything else that you wanted to put out there for the Clippers and Nuggets, or?
Well, just the one other thing I did want to mention that I kind of forgot to say is it's we kind of talked about how the Celtics haven't had all of their good players really have a great night together in the series, and the Nuggets really, for the first time in a while now, have had Murray and Jokic both had big nights. And, I think that is as much, a storyline as anything as to why it was such a different game from game one to game two.
Oh, and I see in your notes here, you have something about Jamal Murray being the best player in the NBA or something like that.
Yeah. No, don't misquote me too bad there. I said if he can take this series to 6 or 7 games and, do as well as he did against maybe not 3, 40 or 50 point games, but if he can be the leading scorer for this team and they can either, somehow pull a big upset in this series or take it to 7 games, make it a lot closer than people expect, I think that definitely vaults him up my list of the top players in the league, not to the top, but a lot higher than where he is now.
Yeah, I think that he's got to be in the top 30 at like bare minimum. I'm probably setting the bar pretty low right now, and that might be a good show idea that we do following the completion of the season, talking about expected rankings for next year.
Rankings for next season, I like that. That sounds good.
Because Murray has definitely been one of the highest risers that we've seen. Between where the season ended and where the playoffs picked up again, he's probably one of the fastest risers. I don't think people are forgetting about Zach LaVine, and I mean, I'm okay with forgetting him. I'm not a really big fan of his anyway, but I'm not here to hate on Zach LaVine, though. We can move on to Milwaukee and Miami, and we're going to kind of tease the current game that just happened today. We're going to walk back to happier times, at least for me, because I picked Miami to beat Milwaukee in this series, and I think that you picked Milwaukee. Is that?
I don't know that we ever really went over exactly. If I did,
sounds like you picked.
I probably picked Milwaukee since I'm not remembering. No, but if I had to give you my real honest thoughts on it at the beginning of the playoffs, if we did it at the beginning of the playoffs, I probably picked Milwaukee. If we did it after round one, I probably picked Miami. Definitely my rooting allegiances have been with Miami in this series, regardless of who I picked.
Sure.
I will say that. I know it's, sounds great to say now that they're, winning the series the way that they are. But I've kind of always been a fan of Eric Spoelstra's, so it's kind of hard. Even when I pick a team, it's kind of hard to root for or against certain teams for me.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fair. That's taking off your biased hat, right? And putting on your unbiased one. But yeah, so going back to game 3, Miami won that game 115-100. Jimmy Butler, another phenomenal game, had 30 points, 7 and 6, had 53% from the floor, 40% from deep, shot only 73% from the free throw line, but hit 14 of his 19 attempts. Bam Adebayo had 20, 16, and 3. He was 87% from the floor and 85% from the free throw line. The Heat had 3 other people in double figures. Jay Crowder has continued just to be an outstanding acquisition in that trade that they got to get Andre Iguodala. I think that Jay obviously has performed better than Iggy in this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Goran Dragic, kind of stepped down to reality a little bit, only had 15. And Tyler Hero, who can't wait to talk about him later, had 13 points. Giannis was held to 21, 16, and 9, shot 33% from the floor. That is a 7 of 21 night, if anyone was wondering. 0 of 7 from deep, and only hit 58% of his free throws, 7 of 12. Those are just not very sexy numbers for Giannis there, as I throw my paper to the floor. Brooke Lopez continuing to play well, had 20 and 6. Chris Middleton had a decent night, 18, 7, and 3. What did you think about Game 3? What that put Miami up 3-0 on this team?
Well, actually, I think there's quite a few big storylines to go over about Game 3. Not to overstate it, I think the fourth quarter of Game 3 of this series may be the worst quarter in Milwaukee Bucks franchise history. Not just for the fact ever, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Not just for the fact that they were outscored 40-13 in the fourth quarter. Not just the fact that they went from a 12-point lead to a 15-point loss. Not just the fact that they went from, down 0-2 to down 0-3, which, like you said earlier, in 139 tries, no one's ever come back from down 0-3. And so, it's all but safe to say that they're done. But beyond all that, I got this feeling watching that fourth quarter and at the end of that game, the same feeling I got at the end of the 2010 playoffs when the Celtics eliminated Cleveland with LeBron was there the first time. I just get this feeling like Giannis is gone.
We got to save that. We got to save that because we got another game to get through, and I think that that's going to add more flavor to whatever it is that you're cooking up over there, right?
Right. So I do think it was a catastrophic turn of events for the entire, Milwaukee Bucks franchise. Game 3, fourth quarter was. It just kind of showed the same kind of thing that we've said all playoffs about Miami when, back when they swept Indiana, and now in the first 3 games and even some in today's game we'll talk about against the Bucks, is they're just so much more aggressive than their opponent. Butler had 17 of his 30 from the free throw line, and 9 of those were in the fourth quarter. He had 17 of his 30 in the fourth quarter, I think. Or I'm sorry, 14 of his 30 from the free throw line. He had 17 of them in the fourth quarter. But, just completely took over the game again at the end. Bam Adebayo, a big double-double, shot 87% from the field, which is insane.
This is automatic.
Against the defensive player of the year, too.
And it's not like he's another candidate for
Lopez, who was, one of the 5 or 10 best rated defensive centers in basketball this year. One of the top, I think, 10 rated defensive players altogether, if you look at the right stats. Yeah. But I think we see a glaring weakness in Giannis's game. Obviously, not just the 3-pointers, 0 for 7, but the fact that, around the rim, he's like at 84% from the field for these playoffs, and outside of 7 feet, he's like 14% or something terrible. Yeah. It's drastic, and it's eye opening, and in the way the league is today, it's one thing to be able to, just attack the rim like he can and get to the rim and get to the foul line pretty much whenever you want. But you've got to be able to counter that as well. And he's not quite good enough of a ball handler to take the ball off the dribble and break a guy down and hit a jumper in his face. That's not his game. And with a team like Miami that knows that and knows that, hey, this guy can't shoot outside of 15 feet, or at least he hasn't been able to, lately, it's easy for them to, pack in their defense. And I said in my notes, if you watch college basketball at all, Virginia does this really well. They call it pack.
That was a good note. Yeah.
So what that means is they pack everybody inside the 3-point line. They kind of stuff everybody in the lane. They build like this wall so Giannis can't get to the rim. And then they just run shooters off the 3-point line. And you kind of force teams to beat you from the perimeter. You don't let them really get too aggressive going to the rim. It helps cut down on free throws. It helps cut down on fouls as a team. And I think you're seeing them run that beautifully. So I think a lot of weaknesses in Giannis's game have kind of reared their ugly head a little bit. And, like I said, I think it was game 3 was kind of the turning point for Milwaukee in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we are going to talk about that, but just going over some more numbers here. Miami actually made 2 less shots than Milwaukee, but they were also 3% better from the floor. And where a lot of these, made up points that they had on fewer attempts was they hit 7 more 3-pointers on 10 more attempts, roughly 8% better than Milwaukee. They made 12 more free throws on 13 more attempts, 8% better overall. Miami was +5 on the glass, +4 in assists, and +4 in fouls. Milwaukee was +12 for points in the paint and only had 1 fewer turnover. And, Giannis, we're going to talk about this again. Giannis actually tweaked his ankle a little bit in this game, and he was kind of questionable whether or not he was going to play today. And I think that reared its ugly head a little bit, so to speak, in his shooting, because this is an area that he gets beat up for a lot, and I think that it really needs to stop as far as the three-pointer. Now, he has no mid-range game or kind of like break-you-down move at all. His break-you-down move is a spin or a Euro step, steamrolling to the basket. If it's inside the three-point line, he is attacking. If it's outside, he has the capability to pull up and shoot. And actually today, he hit all of his threes in the 11 minutes that he played, right? So he's capable of hitting a three-pointer. But to what you were saying earlier, Austin, is that he does not have that Kawhi Leonard, that LeBron James, that James Harden, that Chris Paul, all these guys that look to do something in the playoffs, and they're, people are afraid of them, is because they have that move that they can go to, whether that be a turnaround, fadeaway jump shot, or whether that's a off the ball, pull up dribble, step back Euro, whatever you want to, whatever other player that is in these playoffs, they have at least one of those moves.
Right.
Giannis does not have anything in between the 3-point line and that big that big orange rim that he gets to so easily when he wants to, right?
Right. And I think part of that is one thing is the fact that, he can get to the rim easier than just about anybody else. And, why not attack the rim if you can do it? It's
right.
It's a little bit easier if you're making shots from 2 feet away than it is from 15. But I think even more so what the Bucks miss with him that maybe, the Mavs have with Luka Doncic and the Rockets have with James Harden is that when he does attack, it's pretty much he's going to take a shot. If he goes to the rim, he's almost so violent in his drives that, watch out, because here he comes. He's going to dunk it on you, or he's going to run you over. He gets in foul trouble that way sometimes.
Yep.
And he misses a lot of open shooters that way too. He's still not the best playmaker yet. And I mean, he is 6'11". If he was playing in the NBA 15 years ago, he'd be a center standing under the rim. So the fact that we're expecting all of this from this guy just goes to show how good he is in general, I think.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have a lot of points that I want to get to, but let's run through the game real quick. Giannis hurt his ankle again today in Game 4. Only played 11 minutes, and he only scored 19 points and had 4 rebounds. He was 80% from the floor, 100% from deep, and hit half of his free throws, which I think was 1 of 2. It may have been 2 of 4. Chris Middleton, on the other hand, was like, "Oh no, Giannis, let me go bananas in this game." He had 36, 8, and 8, shot 42.9% from the floor and the 3-point line overall. Made all 9 of his free throws. 4 of the others, as you affectionately refer to them as, right? I think that you got that from Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes.
Were in double-digit scoring. Lopez and Bledsoe both had 14. Hill had 12, and DiVincenzo had 10. And then for the Heat, Bam Adebayo had 26, 12, and 8. He had a lower field goal percentage in this game, only 76% from the floor, hit all 6 of his free throws. Duncan Robinson quietly had a 20-point game with 50% from deep, no free throws. Four other Heat members were in double figures. Jay Crowder again had 18. Butler and Dragic had 17, and Tyler Hero had 11. Milwaukee made 5 more buckets on only 2 more attempts, roughly 4% better from the floor. Miami made 6 more threes on 12 more attempts, roughly 5% better from deep. Milwaukee only hit 17 of 22 free throws, which was 77%, but Miami was slightly better percentile-wise and actually made one more free throw. They were 18 of 20. Now, Miami was +8 in assists and +2 in fouls, which is good. But Milwaukee, on the other hand, was +5 in rebounds, had 3 more offensive rebounds, actually, +3 in turnovers, and +16 in points in the paint. So a completely different game. It was very, very close. Tyler Hero was almost the hero, if you will, for Miami in this game because he hit 2 very clutch threes, but he also had 2 very poorly timed turnovers on him. I think they were consecutive plays, if I'm not mistaken, in overtime. And it was just crazy to me just to see him come off of those 2 turnovers and then almost put them in position to win this game with those 2 clutch threes at the end in overtime. It was insane. What was your impression of how the game went overall, though, in Game 4, Austin?
Well, from your first point about Giannis's injury, you said he only scored 19 points, but obviously it was only in 11 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we may have been robbed of one of the greatest single game performances in playoff history, possibly, or looked like it was on its way. He was on fire. He looked aggressive. He looked like he was going to come out, and you never know. He made it cooled off. He may not have had anything special, other than all the, other big games he's had all year. It may not have been anything that crazy, but I think he was pretty determined not to let his team lose today until obviously he did have that ankle injury. And then everybody else on the Bucks, I think, played about as good as you need those guys to play to win a championship. If you're Milwaukee, they need that kind of production out of all those guys, but they need that on top of Giannis having his 30 and 15.
Middleton still needs to put up that 30 piece.
Exactly. It goes to show that he made a lot of big shots down the stretch. He made a lot of good plays. Maybe he's the guy that they want the ball in his hands down the stretch, because I don't know if Giannis is that guy to give the ball to him and say, hey, go get us a tough contested 2-pointer. And, like you said, he has no mid-range game. He doesn't have much in the way of secondary moves and real polished offensive game. Now, I'm not like James Harden. I don't think all he does is run and dunk, but it is a big portion of what his offense is just his ability to overpower guys and be more athletic than people. And you see when there's a guy like Bam Adebayo who he can overpower and he's not more athletic than, he kind of has. Same thing with Kawhi Leonard last year. Kawhi Leonard's not nearly as big as him, but he's strong and he's a terrific defender. And as soon as Toronto switched him on to Giannis, the series completely changed. And so, maybe Middleton's the guy to give the ball to at the end of the games like that and to go get his own big shot, because he kind of showed that he could do it.
And he wants it too.
And I think he does want it. And another comment I heard somebody say is Giannis more of a Pippen than a Jordan. And I mean, he's a super talented Pippen if he is, but I think the conversation needs to be had is he the guy? Is Giannis good? Not is he good enough, because I think he's good enough, but does he have the makeup to be the number one option on a championship team?
I think he does. I really, truly, honestly do. And Scottie Pippen kind of clapped back at, Richard Jefferson, and then Jay Williams got involved, brought up LeBron James, and LeBron James is like, what the F do I have to do with any of this? Like, I'm just over here trying to chill. Let me live my life. Leave me alone. Right. Again, kind of, I don't know. I think stars are too sensitive, like you're the best player in the NBA. Like, people are going to bring you up, man. Like,
right.
Come on now. But I think that he can be. I think that you're right, though. I think that Chris Middleton has to be the dude with the ball in his hand, because he showed today, dude, that he just absolutely wants it. He put up big numbers. What I would love to see Milwaukee do, and, Coach Bud, if you're listening, if you are, thank you for listening. But if you are listening, what I would love to see is some entry plays to Giannis with position in the paint. We never see that. He's always got the ball outside, and he's just looking to take advantage of his stride and his length. How crazy would it be if you had, high-low action with Chris Middleton and Giannis. Like, why do you not have that in your offense at all?
It doesn't make sense. You don't see a whole lot of any kind of mid or high post play at all in the NBA really anymore. And I think the Bucks have a good team that they could do it, because I think even Brook Lopez could come out on the high post and
Mm-hmm.
take the ball from the top of the key into Giannis, and they could run like a little high low game there.
Yeah,
Maybe some pick and roll with him. I don't know. It just seems like they have a they have this great system of him attacking the rim, finding shooters. They get a lot of good open shots. They just don't seem to
it's
do
predictable.
anything to make it easy. Yes, it doesn't. They don't do anything to make it easier for Giannis to get shots either. They kind of just throw him the ball and let him go, one on one against the guy, and let him get his shot or get fouled, or run some pick and roll for him. I mean, imagine him diving to the rim, throwing up a alley-oop to him, even if it was just a couple times a game, just something different.
Because Chris Middleton can actually pass the ball a little bit too. We said in this
and
game,
George Hill can too.
Finished with 8 assists.
Bledsoe, I think, would be a terrific point guard for a pick and roll.
They need to get rid of Bledsoe. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's not a good fit for that team. I'm not saying that he's a bad player. Maybe I am a little bit, but he does not need to. You cannot win with him as your starting point guard.
No, I
on
think
this team.
I think you're right. I think Milwaukee's weakness is definitely their guard play.
Because if they had Brogdon
least their
instead
starting
of
guard.
Bledsoe, that's another guy that can spot up and create for himself and others too. I mean,
Right.
we can't go back in time, but something worth noting. But yeah, I would love to see a little bit more wrinkles in Coach Bud's offense. I would love to see some high-low and Giannis back down somebody, because he's strong and he's tall. He's gonna draw more attention. You have a guy straight in front of you that you could pass to if that guy's collapsing to you. If not, all you have to do is pivot and throw it. You got you're 7 feet tall. You're gonna throw the ball over whoever it is that you're covering, more than likely.
And you'd have to think that they're going to double team Giannis in the post too. You know what I mean? The defense is
Right.
going to draw into him, and it's just going to open up more shots for more guys. I have a couple questions for you about
Sir.
Milwaukee specifically. A couple things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask the first one and let you answer, and then I'll ask the second one.
Okay.
What do you say to people that after they see this game that say, "Oh, look, the Milwaukee Bucks were better without Giannis"?
I think you're crazy. I mean, obviously, yes, they did get their one win by a single point. Congratulations. But
Right.
look at what Giannis did in 19 points in 11 minutes. Like, you don't think that a team wants that from a player?
Right.
He's defensive player of the year. I mean, maybe Milwaukee wins by even more if Giannis is in this game instead
I
of
think
like
he's
8.
locked in, and like I said, I think this game could have very easily turned into what we saw from Milwaukee in most of the season, a comfortable 15-point win.
And I think too, like Miami, like you can easily reverse what I'm about to say and put it back on the Bucks that they had to do this too. Miami prepared an entire defense for Giannis Antetokounmpo, probably one of the most unique players in the NBA. You brought up their pack line defense. That's all they've been doing and studying for the past several days, and now all of a sudden, like, oh no, like now the court's more wide open. Now we have to defend better. And not only that, but then it's Miami, so they shouldn't be thinking that this way, but they are human too, right? Like, oh, maybe we're about to sweep this team because their best player is no longer playing. Do they let their guard down a little bit?
Right.
I don't think anybody in Miami would admit that, because Pat Riley would step down and hit him over the head with a, rolled up newspaper.
Right.
But maybe that happened. I'm not worried about them losing by 1 point at all.
You're right. They are human, and seeing a guy like Giannis go out, it does change things for the Bucks on offense. It changes things for Miami on defense. It changes things mentally. Like you said, they probably did, kind of take a collective deep breath, so to speak. That okay, hey, now we don't have to worry about this big monster driving to the rim anymore. Let's just play basketball, and they could have eased up a little bit. I don't know that that's the case. I think at any level in the playoffs, it's hard to sweep anybody, regardless of who it is, regardless of how good you match up.
This is the number one team in the entire NBA last time I looked too, right?
Exactly. So. And they were, I think, a historic margin of victory, average margin of victory this year too. So
there's that
they
too.
kind of ran through the first 3 quarters of the league of the year at least. And my second question is something that I heard that I've kind of thought myself before in the past. I want your opinion on it. Mm-hmm. Do you think Mike Budenholzer is a bad playoff coach?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know of another coach that could have got the type of effort out of that Atlanta Hawks team that he did. I mean,
right.
They didn't. They were the number 1 seed in the East, and this is the argument that you hear, like, well, look at what he did in Atlanta. He got them to be the number 1 seed, and they didn't do anything in the playoffs. Okay, sure, but like, what other NBA head coach is going to get a team that's got Al Horford, Kyle Korver, Paul Millsap, Jeff Teague, DeMarre Carroll, what has he done since he left Atlanta? Nothing at all. Right. So, I mean, what other coach is going to get that type?
Just about everywhere he's gone since then.
Pretty much. He and Coach Bud got him paid in Toronto, so I'm sure that DeMarre Carroll is a big Bud fan, right?
Right.
You have now. I did just pick apart. Like, why are you not doing X, Y, or Z? He is one of those coaches that is just like, I am so hell-bent on doing things the way that I believe to be the right way, no matter how many people are telling me I'm wrong. He's not going to adjust, and that, to me, in the playoffs is kind of a kiss of death. What makes a good playoff coach, though? Like, he's out of the first round. He's in the second round, and he's losing to a team that had his number in the regular season. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought that up. What makes a good playoff coach and what's the difference between regular season and playoffs? And even more so than, can he handle the bright lights of the playoffs or the pressure? I don't know that has anything to do with it.
There's nobody in Orlando right now. It's
right.
Not the pressure.
Exactly. What I think it is more so than anything is the fact that you're playing the same team over and over and over. And like you said, he is so hell-bent on running his system. It's very structured. We're going to do things this way. You saw it in that interview when he said he thinks 36 minutes or more for Giannis is pushing the ceiling, where, you see a lot of other coaches, play guys 47. Kyle Lowry played all but like a minute and a half in the last game for Toronto.
The other coach in this series, Eric Spoelstra, is not doing that,
Exactly. And I just think that maybe it's just the fact that he doesn't make a good enough adjustments from one game to the next, or maybe his strategy or his game plan isn't diverse enough. Maybe it is just a little bit too predictable or easy to figure out, because it does seem like this is the second or third time he's had a team just blow everybody away in the regular season, do better than expected or as good as expected, get the top seed, and then kind of fizzle out in the playoffs. And the only real thing that I could think of that is different is the fact that you're playing the same team over and over again, and they kind of get a book on you, and they get enough film. And, a guy like Eric Spoelstra, I think you said it, Miami's looking like the best coach team in the playoffs right now. And, I think
definitely top 3. I would put him in the same ring as, the Celtics and the Raptors. I think that those are like, if you're talking about coaching performances, I think those, and I would even put Mike D'Antoni in that category as well. But one thing I will say for Coach Bud,
don't get too crazy now, but okay.
I mean, did anyone expect Houston's defense? We'll talk about this later, because you wrote an awesome piece on this. But like, was Mike D'Antoni a defensive coach?
No.
Do they have their defensive coach in Orlando?
No.
Are they playing one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the entire playoffs right now? Yes, they are. I mean, D'Antoni has done a fine job, in my opinion.
Well, I'm just a hater. That's all.
I know. But going back to Coach Bud, he is he's a branch off of the Greg Popovich tree. Like, and I think Greg Popovich is the best. Everyone watching or listening, hear me. Like, Greg Popovich is my all-time coach ever. He's not necessarily the most flexible coach either. You know what I mean? So, like, Coach Bud came from that system, saw it be successful. Why would he want to deviate from that if you're him right now?
Because he doesn't have Tim Duncan.
Because he doesn't have Tim Duncan managing Ginobili or Tony Parker. But he does have, he does have Giannis. He does have Chris Middleton and a lot of good role players. I mean, I could understand why he doesn't want to, although I don't agree with it. I don't think that he is like an amazing playoff coach. I don't think that he's like the. I don't know. Like, this is really tricky. I would say he's average
Mm-hmm.
because his team is successful enough to win, but he doesn't do anything that's like, wow, I didn't expect to see Coach Bud do that in these
Right.
playoffs.
He's not going to take over a team from the former coach of the year and make them 10 times better. He's not going to be Nick Nurse that's going to, blow your mind in the playoffs and say, "Hey, look at this." He's not going to take a Celtics team with a rookie and a second or third year player as the two best players all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals to Game 7 against LeBron and the Cavs.
He's not going to be the dude like let's try a triangle and two defense in the
Right.
playoffs.
I
He's
don't
not.
think his coaching genius is going to win you a title with a team that's not necessarily the favorite to win the title already.
Yeah.
But I don't. Is he going to hold back a team that could win a title from winning a title just because of him? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case either.
I would look at that Atlanta job that he did and be like, how many other coaches could have got that type of performance out of Atlanta?
Right.
And that's what elevates him. Now, what reins me back in is you have what we just talked about, right? Like, why isn't Giannis and Chris Middleton doing X, Y, and Z? And like me and you are just dudes, right? So, I don't know. I think that he was an average one, but but to the critics, favor, he definitely deserves criticism. I'll totally get that. While we're still on the Bucks, I know that we've been here a while. I have some questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So they were down 3-0 without Giannis, correct?
Right.
They lost Giannis in this game and they won. Now, I have two questions based off of this. Is that a bad look for Giannis? In your eyes, is that a bad look that they won?
No, because I think of all the things we've talked about already. One, it's not like he didn't play at all. He did have 19 points. Regardless of if he only played 11 minutes, he still had 19 points.
Second leading scorer on his team.
Right. And, I think too, like we said, Miami was all geared up to play this one style of defense where he's going to have the ball in his hands most of the time. Plus, I think there's something to be said about their backs being against the wall. It's game 4. Their season is on the line, literally. It's win or go home. I think all that stuff kind of played into it. And I think also Miami, still had every chance in the world to win that game. So it's not like they took him out and all of a sudden off they went and they could play again all of a sudden. It wasn't like something like that. So, no, I don't think it's a bad look for Giannis. I think it could get construed that way. I think, you could see it that way, but I don't.
Okay, that's a fair take. I'm in agreement with you now. Let's say he comes back for their next game, right? Say he comes back in game 5 and they lose then. What is your perception? And then how do you think other people will perceive him?
I could see how the story on it could be maybe like we talked about. Maybe Chris Middleton needs to be the guy at the end of the game, because if it comes down to it and Giannis makes a couple of bad plays or gets an offensive foul in a close game, or he has another game where he's held far below his season averages and they lose
18 points, 22 points.
Exactly. Yeah. And if that's the case, then I think you could make an argument that, hey, maybe this, at least maybe with Budenholzer's offense and the style that they play, maybe spreading the ball around a little bit more works better for this team. Again, I think it's crazy to say that they're a better team without him.
Yeah,
I think that just, you may not even make it to the playoffs without Giannis on that roster versus the number 1 seed. I think
you may make a 7th or 8th seed,
but you get what I'm. But you understand,
you're not running the gauntlet. Yeah,
they're not going to be the favorites to win a series probably at all without him on their roster. I think everything he does makes everyone around him better, especially defensively. I think he's the best help defender in the league. He's not incredibly strong one-on-one on-ball defender, but he makes up for a lot of that having 18-foot long arms too. That helps.
He's made of rubber,
and he cleans up a lot. Yeah, he cleans up a lot of mistakes for his opponent or for his teammates, and So I could see how you could make a case that maybe on this team and as it's currently constructed and the way they want to play, that it would be a bad look for him. But if he goes out and just balls out and dominates and has a 40-point game and they still lose, then I don't think you can really put that squarely on him. But
Yeah.
Somebody will. So.
Oh yeah, it's already happening. Like as they were playing and they were keeping it close, and as they won, I saw so many people on social media say, "Oh man, they're better without Giannis." I'm like, dude, he's only been hurt for an hour. Can we
Right.
chill? Not even can we chill with this for just a quick second? Let it breathe, please.
One game into the playoffs, is Giannis a Jordan or a Pippen? It's just crazy.
And dude, I feel so bad for him. And a couple of my buddies brought this up to me. Is when all of a sudden is Giannis one of the most hated players in the NBA? All of a sudden,
when you start winning accolades, and that's what happens.
People are putting him in Miami Heat jerseys and saying, "Oh, is this going to be worse than Kevin Durant?" Dude hasn't even left. He's still a member.
He might not. He might decide he wants to stay.
He might, and he's different. He's not a dude he's not a friendly dude. He's not out there meeting up with people saying "Oh, hey man, let's do this." He's more of a Jimmy Butler than he is like a LeBron or a KD.
Right. And you don't think of him as someone that's super controversial, maybe, but you saw in the All-Star game, he was the only one that said anything about we're going to target James Harden's defense. He pretty much called him out, and he got pretty, upset and pretty defensive when they said, well, why didn't you tell the coach you wanted to guard Jimmy Butler? And he just kind of bristles at the way a lot of other people think and the way a lot of other people act and associate with each other. So, I could see him being the superstar that says, no, I want to stay here and I want to build things here. And I think a lot of, especially, Milwaukee Bucks fans are going to have to eat a plate of crow, like you like to say, that, if he does stay, because I have heard just vitriol online about him and it's just awful.
I think that
you hear that about anybody though nowadays.
Yeah. I think that it's given one thing that I told somebody is that it would have been better for the Bucks to lose this game if they want to keep Giannis, because now they may have this false sense of security now all of a sudden somewhere that okay, we don't need Giannis to be successful, which is insane because this dude's about to be one of the very few players to ever win MVP and Defensive Player in the year. And people are already saying is he going to be more of a snake than Kevin Durant by going to the Heat after he loses to the Heat? And it just blows my mind. And one thing that I would it's going to be such a bad look for the casual or, the controversial fan if he comes back and loses. I don't think that speaks any less of his talent or skill, because, the dude is, 25? I think he just turned 25. He still's got a long way to go. He's not going to be in his NBA prime for another 2-3 seasons.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say.
So it's driving me nuts that all of a sudden Giannis went from being one of the faces of the NBA. Now people are oh, look at Luka and Jason Tatum and Brandon Ingram. And don't get me wrong, I love those guys, but Giannis has been that dude for seasons now, and I don't know.
Yeah,
if he leaves, it's going to be a bad look, and if he loses in this game, it's going to be a bad look too, because the only game that they won was when he got hurt and only had 19 points in 11 minutes, but they won without him.
Right. And the other point too about the whole thing comparing him to Kevin Durant is he can't go anywhere this year. Nope. He can't go anywhere until
he demands a trade.
Unless he demands a trade. But if he demanded a trade, you think the Bucks are going to trade him to the Heat? There's no way in the world. I don't think, unless they just offer him some incredible package of players.
We could talk about this at another point, but when an NBA player demands a trade, even the San Antonio Spurs kind of bent to the will of Kawhi Leonard, even though they didn't have to.
Right, but I think the Pacers kind of maybe wrote the book on how the best way to do that, because Paul George did kind of say he wanted to go to the Lakers, and the Pacers said, well, you know what, you're going to have to go wherever we send you, wherever we get the best deal from. And I think it worked out really.
The Raptors did that, or the Spurs did that too.
I think it worked out really well for them, and I think more teams may see that. I think Milwaukee is probably going to try to do everything they can to convince him to stay. And I think if he does demand a trade, I don't see him having enough leverage to demand a trade right to one team, and that's where he's going to go. I also don't see Giannis being the type of guy to demand a trade to a team that just beat him. He just doesn't strike me as that player.
I will say, so if I gave you a false impression of what I was saying, I don't think that he's going to say, I would demand to go to this team and you're going to do that. Right. I think that he could, I'd hope not, but he could demand a trade, and then you could start seeing him go places. That's what I was saying, not saying like, hey, trade me to the Heat, and if you don't do this.
No, I get that. My bigger point is just that even if he does demand a trade, it's not like as soon as this season's over, he's going to go sign with the enemy, and there's a lot of attractive options of where he could go, I think I was just going to say, I think the Dallas Mavericks fans are pretty high on him going there.
Because they can't trade for him. They don't have picks or players that are sexy enough to move a needle for a Giannis trade.
Right. And I don't know. Toronto is another place I've heard that he would want to go. I hope he doesn't go to Golden State.
Oh my goodness.
Hope, beyond hope, that he doesn't go to Golden State.
I've heard almost every team you can think of, man. I heard the Lakers are another
I've heard
one.
Bulls.
Who
does the Bulls? The Bulls have a lot of young guys.
The Knicks. I'm sorry, Chris LeBron, if you're watching. He's
maybe he'll go resurrect the Knicks. That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
They were talking about Masai Ujiri leaving Toronto and going to do that, but he just signed an extension, so it's not looking so hard. Knicks fans, if you're listening, I promise I didn't mean to trash you guys. That it wasn't in my notes at all to say trash the Knicks. So
right,
but I think that we can. Giannis
a little bit of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think that we could Giannis speculate for another hour. I don't feel like doing that. I think that we've covered our bases a little bit on that one. Mm-hmm. And we can cover the one game that I'm telling you, man, these number one seeds and losing the first games in each round, I don't know if that's ever happened. I know that it's happened where both one seeds have lost in their opening matches in the first round. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's ever happened in consecutive rounds.
Well, it's something I can find out and let everybody know for our next show. I actually did a little digging into this, and I know that the Milwaukee Bucks are only the fourth one seed ever, and so the Lakers were then the fifth. So they're the fourth and fifth one seeds to ever lose the first game of each of their first two rounds. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's ever happened in the same year to both of the one seeds.
It's crazy.
If it did, it was fairly recently, in 2015, but I'm not 100% sure that it was both sides. So I'll have to look that up and let you know for next week. But it is a little surprising the way that went down. I'll let you go ahead and kind of break it down for everybody.
Yeah, sure. And we're referring to the Los Angeles Lakers losing their first game to the Houston Rockets. I know that fans everywhere are just blowing this up. Like, what does this mean for LeBron James and his legacy, right? But the Lakers lost 112-97. James Harden looked like the James Harden that everyone's familiar with in the regular season, right? He had 36, 5, and 2, shot 60% from the floor, hit half of his threes, 3/4 of his free throws. Brody actually had it. That's Russell Westbrook for people who aren't familiar with NBA nicknames. Brody had 24, 9, and 6, shot 41% from the floor. Only 20% from three, but man, did he let everyone in the arena hear that one that he hit over Anthony Davis. He was yelling at whoever was in that area. I don't know who was there.
It's the family section. So he's over there cussing out moms and kids or whatever he was doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, good for him. And he hit half of his free throws, right? Eric Gordon is continued to kind of have a productive postseason after kind of disappearing, so to speak, in the regular season. He had 23 and 3, hit half of his shots, 37% from deep, all of his free throws, and even Austin Rivers had a good game with 10 points. Anthony Davis had 25, 14 and 1, hit 62% from the floor, half of his threes, all of his free throws, and LeBron James had 28 and 7. There's a gap there between 20 and 8. He had 46% of his shots from the floor went in. He was only 2 of 7 from deep, 28%, if anyone is trying to calculate that real quick, and 80% from the free throw line. Two other Lakers were in double figures. That was Alex Caruso with 14 and Danny Green with 10. Now, I mentioned earlier how Kawhi Leonard had 0 points in the fourth quarter. LeBron James in this game, 0 points in the fourth quarter. What was your overall impression of that game, Austin?
Well, me, where my allegiances lie. I wasn't too happy with the outcome of that game.
Come on.
I kind of it didn't really go as I expected. I kind of thought Houston might come out and win the first game, to be honest. Just kind of how I felt about the first game against Portland, too. But it doesn't really make me nervous. I kind of feel like they are kind of taking a feel-out approach in these first games. And, LeBron even kind of echoed those sentiments. He said, you can practice against this team or, against their strategy, their offensive sets all you want. Their philosophy, that's the word I was looking for.
There you go. I'm here to help, bro.
Yeah, you've got a couple nice assists today for me. I can't seem to find my words every so often. Dude,
Steve Nash is my favorite player. So
there you go. Set me up. That's perfect.
No looks even. I wasn't even looking
right. At that one was definitely behind the back or something. But no, I actually tried to look up how many times in the fourth quarter of a playoff game LeBron James went scoreless, and it was a lot more than I expected, so it wasn't worth counting them all. So
it's crazy because if this dude ties his shoe with 30 seconds left in the third quarter, there's a tracking number on that'll appear on the bottom of ESPN or ABC, whoever's televising it, but you don't really see any of those 0 points in the fourth quarters floating around anywhere.
No, but it's happened more often than you'd think. We'll just leave it at that. I think a couple of things. Alex Caruso should have played more in that game. Rondo wasn't really doing a whole lot for them. He did come back, but I think it almost seemed like they played Rondo like he was a guy that they said, "Oh man, now that he's back, we can win again." Like we rely on him to win again.
They're paying him $15 million a year or something crazy, right? No, he's on a very low contract. You're not obligated to pay or play Rajon Rondo.
Right, exactly. And Caruso was hitting shots, which he doesn't always do. He is a better defender than people give him credit for. He can handle the ball a little bit. He does a lot of things fairly well without doing anything great. Kuzma, for all the strides he's made defensively over the last few weeks and over this season, just got absolutely cooked every time he was out there. He looked awful defensively. And the couple things that I really thought were going to go the Lakers' way as far as points in the paint and rebounds did not. Both teams actually tied with 41 rebounds, which, if you're Frank Vogel and the Lakers, you've got to be pretty upset about that.
Especially when you're intentionally going with big lineups.
Right. And then also, too, Houston outscored them in the paint by 2 as well, which, I think that's something that's got to be a focus in the game that it's actually going on right now. That's what I keep looking away at.
No, you're fine. Yeah, that game was a 16-point lead going into the half, and now Houston has brought it back down to 7.
Yep, it's from what I can see. 67-60 right now. There's about 2 or 3 minutes gone in the third quarter. So they came out hot to start the third quarter, obviously.
Yep, 9-0 run.
Yeah. So, that's the thing with Houston with the threes is they can really cut into a lead quickly. But that's another thing that was kind of surprising. For the playoffs, the Houston Rockets had averaged 51 attempts per game, and they only took 39 in game one, only one more than the Lakers.
Yeah.
So, really the ways.
3 more, though.
Yeah. But the ways that I thought Houston could win the game were not the ways that they did win the game. And that's actually kind of what sparked my, thinking for that article that I wrote that, I wanted to talk about a little bit later. But it was interesting to see them, they locked in on defense in the fourth quarter when they needed to. They held the Lakers, I think, to 17 fourth quarter points, which is very insane. Low for today's NBA. And it just, they kept up on the boards. They outplayed them, obviously, as far as points in the paint. And those are just things that I thought the Lakers were going to have huge advantages in. And, going into the rest of the series, you've got to think that that's got to be their focus.
Yeah, and a lot of the same notes that you have are the ones that I took too. You spoke to the 41 rebounds that both teams were tied in, right? Houston
Hmm.
had one more assist, one less turnover, two more points in the paint, and one less foul. So all those winning stats that I like to continuously bring up every playoff game, Houston was better than the LA Lakers at, except for the reboundings, which they were just so happened to be tied for, right? So
Right.
not a bad look if you're a Rockets fan. Now,
No, and what you said about those winning plays. Usually, when you think of Harden and Westbrook and LeBron, you think of LeBron makes the winning plays, and those other two guys don't. That
yeah,
wasn't the case in Game One. That's for sure.
yeah, and good thing it's a 7 game series, right?
Hmm.
So I was actually surprised to see the game go down the way that it did. I made notes specifically to bring up that consecutive series openers that the
Hmm.
number one seeds have had, they have lost. I don't know if it's a great strategy to go out and try to intentionally lose the first game of the playoffs. I don't think that they can do that every round that they
Right.
continue to advance, right? Um, the Rockets, I talked about how the Lakers, the path that they have to go through, they're getting their defensive weaknesses exposed pretty frequently, right? With going from playing against Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, and even Gary Trent Jr. for a little bit, to now you're having to play against Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Eric Gordon. You're getting your perimeter defense exposed quite frequently. Now, this isn't anything that I am saying that the Lakers are like need to hit the panic button right now.
Right.
I think that comes later, but against the Rockets, I don't know for the life of me why Anthony Davis is so. I don't know if he's petrified or just doesn't want to do it. But playing center, I don't know why he just absolutely does not want to play it. And this is a point that I bring up when people are like, "Oh, he's a first teamer," and I'm like, "No, he's not taking a first team spot over LeBron James or Giannis."
Right.
So what position are you putting him at? And they'll say center. Like, he doesn't play center, and he says he's not a center. And if you look
Hmm.
at the percentage of what positions he plays, he doesn't play enough to be considered or to be classified as a center. The only way that you can put him there is if you just want to have him to be a first team All NBA talent. So bringing that back into this game, if he plays center, they have no chance. The Rockets, that is, they have no chance of beating them. But when you have two guys coming in who you don't really have to guard at all, and JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, you're limiting an already kind of limited offense with the Los Angeles Lakers because they're still not really setting the world on fire offensively. Their defense has been actually pretty good, right? But
Right.
as athletic as that front court is, you would think that they would try to be even faster with Kuzma, LeBron, and Anthony Davis in that kind of front court lineup.
Yeah, that it makes sense. I actually, believe it or not, would like to see them feature Dwight Howard a little bit more. I think they either need to do what you said, play Anthony Davis at the five, or just go big, go really big, put Dwight Howard in there a little bit more. I've never been a huge fan of JaVale McGee, to be totally honest. I like his game. He does some things well, but I just think when Dwight's in there, people forget how good Dwight Howard was not
He
that long ago. And I
carried
mean,
a
he's
team to the Eastern Conference Finals as a center.
right. He carried a team to the finals,
Yeah, excuse me,
as a
the
center.
finals, the
Yeah,
final finals.
and he's obviously not that Dwight Howard anymore, but
No,
he has moments where he's just every bit the athletic freak and the defensive monster that he was back then. And I just think he might actually be the key for this team, because if you've got him in there with Anthony Davis all the time and maybe Kuzma in there too, then PJ Tucker can't focus just on Anthony Davis, because PJ Tucker's going to have to guard one of those three big guys, and it's not always going to be able to be Anthony Davis. And we've seen, and the statistics show, PJ Tucker is literally the best one-on-one defender in the NBA against Anthony Davis, and has been all year, and has been almost his whole career, really.
and he's the
And
most underpaid player in the NBA.
and he's
in my
6'5",
eyes. Yeah.
and Anthony Davis is almost a 7-footer. And it's frustrating to see, but I was always been with you with Houston. I'm not a big fan. I've never been a big fan of the way they play with Harden. Just all the isolations, all the threes,
All
and
the foul hunting.
foul hunting, all that stuff, and just how many isolation plays and how many, step back threes he's taken. But it works. And, they've tweaked that system a lot to where it's more like the Spurs used to be, where they do drive the ball a lot. Yeah. They move the ball better than just about any team left I've seen in the NBA.
Yeah, and what's crazy to me is that if you actually watch this team with the disposition that you could be wrong in how that you're evaluating this team, like if you're going into this game and saying, let me just see if Houston is terrible as a team as I think they are, you might be pleasantly surprised if you just like watch a game and don't even pay attention to the faces and the jerseys, right? Because they're not playing like the Houston. We've mentioned this several times on this show. Is they are not playing like the Houston Rockets that we grew up watching. At least when when Harden went to that team, and they had Dwight Howard and all these other cats on the Chandler Parsons, all these other cats on this team, and he's basically transformed himself. That foul hunting behavior is nowhere near as frequent as it used to be, and the defensive effort is just phenomenal. Like most blocks in a season by a guard in like 5 years.
Right, and he led the NBA in steals. This is I'll just get into it. I actually just recently finished a piece for the Game Changer Sports Network all about the Houston Rockets and just how much different they really are than what the narrative around them has been really since Harden came into the league. And that reputation as a bad defensive team was well earned.
Yeah, absolutely. That was not unwarranted.
It was actually hard to Google and find instances of video of James Harden playing good defense. But you can find 1,000 hours of GIFs and pictures of him doing that wraparound steal attempt and just letting guys blow by him and not trying, flopping, like you said, foul hunting, all that stuff. It's hard to watch. It's effective, but it's boring to watch for one. And it's
a turn.
It's an ugly way to play basketball, really. And but since 2017, since Chris Paul came to Houston, you've seen kind of a culture change there. D'Antoni's system has kind of changed as far as, it used to be James Harden went for all that foul hunting stuff because he kind of had to. I don't think he trusted his teammates like he does now. I think he trusts the guys on this team more. I think he gets along with Russell Westbrook really well. It seems like him and, Eric Gordon, Daniel House, all those guys, they've really gelled. And
Austin Rivers.
And, this is actually one of the better defensive teams in the NBA. And this year, for the regular season, they finished 21st, which was back down a little bit. But the last 2 years, they were in the top 10 in points per game allowed and defensive efficiency. And they're the most efficient defensive team in the bubble since the season has restarted. And they're the best team, the best defensive team left in the playoffs.
Without their defensive coordinator.
Right. Exactly. Who, he's not there because of the concerns about COVID.
Sure.
And
fairly so, no criticism.
Right. Exactly. Better safe than sorry. I agree. But, and it's not really that big of a surprise if you look at their roster. PJ Tucker is an extremely underrated defender, as we've already talked about. Robert Covington was first team all defense just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Harden
PJ Tucker
rated out as like the 18th best defender in basketball this year. He led the NBA in steals, and this team can play defense, and they're scrappy and they're smaller, but they play fast. They defend for the whole 24-second shot clock, and it's not just all steals and blocks either. They play. Harden's an elite post defender. He's really good at causing turnovers when his man drives. He's crafty. He doesn't really look the part of a great defender, but he knows where to be on the court at the right time, and he's giving effort that he didn't used to give. So it's interesting because I was always been with you, never really been a big fan of the way that they have done things in the past. But even their offense has changed so much. It's not him hunting for fouls anymore. It's kick it out to a guy and move the ball and let Eric Gordon drive it in this time, and then he does the same thing, and then the next time down, Westbrook does the same thing, and Westbrook's still a little out of control, but when
yeah, that's
when
another story.
When he's clicking, and I mean, this team is impressive to watch because it's like he just like that supercharger for everything. He just gets the ball and he's going 110 miles an hour the whole game.
Yeah, and you talked about their defense. There's 5 minutes left in the third quarter, and they've held the Lakers, which, largely is considered to be a championship favorite by some this year. I've only scored 13 points in the third quarter right now, and that's a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and they don't have a traditional big man.
Right. Anthony Davis, you would think, just looking at it on paper, should be able to go out and get 17 points in a quarter by himself.
Yeah, he should be averaging 30 this series. But, again, Frank Vogel, I don't know why you're not playing him at center. There's such a disadvantage. I don't know. But,
the numbers on how much better offensively they are at center is unreal. Like, it's like per 100 possessions, it's like 15 points or something crazy.
Yeah, and
I know it's a small sample, but still.
You're not going to see those Coach Bud things about like being unwilling to adjust in the playoffs because you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on this team, right?
Most people already discount Vogel's coaching from the get-go anyway because LeBron's there.
Yeah, and anytime anything bad happens, it's going to be Vogel's fault, and anytime something good happens, it's going to be all credit to LeBron James. We see this
which is
everywhere he goes.
Is part of the reason, if you go on social media and you look at 76ers fan groups, all they do is tear apart Tyronn Lue. Like they do not want him to be their next coach, and I think he's going to do a pretty good job.
I don't think so. I think that he deserves a shot based off his credentials alone. He's
the assistant for the Clippers this year, and by all accounts, he's a great basketball mind. I think just what kills me about the Sixers fans is they act like because AI stepped over him in the finals in 2000 that he can't ever be their coach.
That probably has a little bit to do with it, but that has nothing to do with I don't think that he was that great of a coach.
He didn't blow me away either. I think it's. I think he deserves. I think he premature to say that he wasn't a good coach.
Yeah, I think that he deserves it, and he deserves to be in a place where he could prove us right or wrong, right? I think that he deserves that fair shake, even though he coached LeBron James, and that ended up helping him get a ring on his finger. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's a fair place to wrap it up. It's almost the fourth quarter now in this game, and it's a 2-point lead, which going into the half, it was a 16-point lead. So
I don't know how nervous. Confident when we started talking about these guys than I am now.
I don't know how confident you are in, taking the series to 1-1, or are you looking at 0-2?
Oh, I think the Lakers will pull this one out. I think they'll win this series in 5 or 6 games. But I do want to say, I think that like you said, Portland and the Rockets both are really, really rough matchups for the Lakers, guard-heavy teams, whereas I think that's part of the reason the Clippers don't scare me as much because I just think the Lakers kind of match up a little better with them. So I'm worried, but I'm not that worried.
Except for in the regular season when they only won 1 game.
It was 2-2. It was 2-2.
Yeah, okay. But I think that wraps up our playoff discussion. We just have a couple little housekeeping things to cover before we close out. We have a new website, which is specifically for our podcast. It's called breakingthegamepodcast.com. There you can find, obviously, our podcast there. You can find some written work, some links to our written work, which we have posted here on the Off the Ball Network right here, and then the Game Changer Sports Network, which is where Austin is currently, putting his workout at. So both of those places can be found on our website. You could also find our video library where you can see, videos of what we're doing now. All of those are going to be posted on there. And then, just a little bit about us if you're kind of curious to, how we got to be where we are and, a little bit more information about us personally, things like that. You can find that there. And then also new to what we do is a YouTube channel, which, it's currently streaming live right now. We haven't really pushed that very much, but, you can go on YouTube and look up Breaking the Game, and you can find us on there if you prefer watching your videos on YouTube, Vice, Facebook, or Twitter, or what have you. We're available there now. Austin, I know that you're a very busy man over at the Game Change Sports Network. Congratulations, by the way. What is your current title there, and what are some of the things that you're doing there?
Yeah, so I actually just got kind of, I guess, a promotion, if you want to call it that. I'm one of the editors now for Game Changer Sports Network. Just really means I kind of go over all the articles as they're posted, give them a looking over, make sure there's no big changes or anything that we need to make. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not a whole lot of extra work because everybody there is pretty talented and they all do a good job. I want to just kind of point out to everybody the website that you just started for us and the YouTube. Steven does all that work for us. He does a great job with all that stuff. Thank goodness, because some
I
of that's a
appreciate
little
it,
bit
man.
some of that's a little bit lost on me. I'm getting better with technology. I'm not terrible with it, but any of the graphics, any of the stuff you see up on here, other than my smiling face talking, is pretty much all Steven. So, thank you for doing all that. And I know you've been doing really great work at the Off the Ball Network too. So go ahead and tell everybody about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I put up a new piece this week, and it's something that I would like to get on a live with somebody and discuss. But basically, Glue Guy of the Year. It's a obviously it's a made up category, so to speak. But I felt it was one that deserved a little bit of conversation because I just get tired of regurgitating the same information that you can find anywhere else. Wanted a kind of a unique piece of my own, and I did about 18 candidates on. Obviously, not every team has a glue guy, right? There's 30 teams, only 18 names, so let you kind of work it out a little bit amongst yourself as to who's probably on there and not. I did top 5, and I'm not going to spoil who I have as my number 1. You can find that written work at offtheballnetwork.com.
That's called a tease, people.
It's called a tease, so please, I hope you're enticed and you go look that up. But you can find that on offtheballnetwork.com, or if you're on our website, breakingthegamepodcast.com, you can find the link there to go and get that work.
Definitely. And, something I think that would be interesting to do that we could maybe, once the season's over, make a show out of is come up with our own set of like fictional awards. Cause thought I've kind of been a little bored with the NBA awards for a while now. I think it'd be fun to, add in a glue guy of the year. Maybe we could come up with some other interesting ideas for something like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I would be very much happy to do something like that with you, because I know you do a great job no matter what you do. Speaking of which, leaning in, this is a segue, as we like to say. Right. I know that you're doing a lot of stuff at the Game Changer Sports Network. I will get that right at some point, I promise. It's just hard to say.
It's a mouthful a little bit, but it's cool.
Game Changer Sports Network. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that I looked on there the other day, and I think that you put up at least an article a day, if not 2. So you want to go ahead and let the listeners know what you got going on?
I just try to add something to the site every day if I can. I actually am in the process of working on a column for the fantasy football league that we're doing as part of for the website as well. So that's something that might be coming in the future. Right now, it's just NBA. Obviously, there's more than enough to keep me busy. Trying to do little quick game reviews after every game. So that keeps me busy. And then, I already mentioned that Rockets article that I just put together. It's easy to do when you love it, and I definitely love doing it. So, it's fun to put in the work. That's for sure.
Yeah, and especially when you're good at it too, Austin. You do a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no problem at all, brother. But yeah, as for you, the listeners or viewers, whether you're watching or listening now or later, if you want to kind of connect with us as a collective unit for the Breaking the Game Network, we have a couple places where you can do that. You can look here at Twitter. I got to point at both now, unless you want to point with me.
I'll help.
There we go. Yeah, so you can check us out at Twitter at BTG NBA Pod or Instagram at BTG NBA Pod. You find us at both of those places. If you want to email us with any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, arguments, whatever, all of it is welcome. You can email us at breakingthegamepodcast@gmail.com. And again, please, please, please go check us out on YouTube, Breaking the Game. Subscribe there. You can follow along with everything that we got going on there. And then also go check out the website, breakingthegamepodcast.com. Austin, you got anything else that you want to say before you go and hope that your Lakers come back from this deficit that they're all of a sudden
I'm gonna hop off of here and probably yell at the TV for the next 20 or 30 minutes. But not to get too far ahead of you, but I would like to talk with you a little bit after we're done about, possibly maybe bringing the viewers some merchandise here in the future. Nothing big, but something I think we had talked about before.
Sure.
And, we do have a lot of platforms. So hopefully we, in the future can kind of diversify what we do. And so, the sky's the limit. I'm excited to see where this all takes us. So.
Oh yeah, man. I'm all ears. You certainly brought a great flavor and, a whole bunch of different unique perspectives and thoughts. And it's what made us better from the get-go and why I'm thrilled to have you on. But
good.
That's going to do it here for us at Breaking the Game. You can, again, follow us at all those places that I already probably bored you to death with earlier. And, all that support the show, you're greatly valued and appreciated. We appreciate the love. Exactly. Tell your friends, share us wherever you can. And we appreciate you guys. You've been awesome. I've been Stephen Gillespie. This guy over here has been Austin Carr. And we will catch up. I think so. Yeah. Last time I checked, it says it right underneath your face there.
That's why I have that there. That way I don't forget.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll catch up with you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Much love.